broadcasting students in OAB. First of all, thank you so much for asking me to bestow upon you everything that's in here. God help you. Bear with me. Don't have a lot of time. Got to be a lot of fast edits here. I got too much stuff. Okay. You got to get their attention. Just send us your best stuff. And then you got 15 seconds, at least in my books you do, 15 seconds to wow me, to make me think, oh yeah, okay, this person's got some qualities there I think I might be able to work with. So there you go. Step one, I'm getting a gig. Can you do production? Can you write? Can you produce? Can you edit video? Can you shoot video? Social media. Yes, being on air is important, but in today's industry, in case you haven't noticed, things are shrinking. So ultimately, you want to be the person where if they need to let somebody go, they go, we can't let them go. They do too much. They're too valuable. So be that person in order to get the gig. Attitude is everything, okay? If somebody calls you up, a program director calls you up, say, hey, I heard your demo. I think it's pretty good. Are you interested in chatting? You're like, wow, holy cow, I can't believe it. This is so out of the blue. Tell me a little bit more about it. And if it's okay, can I call you back at a good time and go over some questions that I may have? Get yourself some passion, because that will help you. What? You need your foot in the door, because when you get your foot in the door, it gives you that opportunity to go, hey, I can do this. Hey, I'd like to try this. Volunteer for everything. Even if you don't know it, learn it. I was offered the job of program director. I'd never been a program director before. I'm 7+ years into it. Things are pretty good. I didn't really know everything about it, but I said yes, and I learned along the way. And you know what I got? You got to be willing to relocate. You got to be willing to move. You got to go where the money is and set yourself some goals when you're there. All right. I'm in small market, Alberta. I give myself 2 years to learn as much as I possibly can so I can move on and get the next best gig in a bigger market with more money. And then set yourself another goal of 2 years or maybe 3 years. Life gets in the way. But either way, know where you ultimately want to go and work towards getting there. Make those phone calls. Make those connections. Do all that networking. It's very important. Send out your demos to PDs of markets you want to go to and ask for their critiques. If they don't get back to you right away, chances are a lot won't, but just keep trying. Do not lose sight of where you want to be, so you can ultimately, what? Passion is going to be what fuels your career onward and upward. So thank you for the opportunity to chat with you, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Good luck. Get a gig.
All right. Well, welcome. Thank you so much, Troy McCallum from Boom 97.3 for the inspiration and ways to get ahead. Get the Gig is our theme for today, our annual OAB Career Day. Thank you so much to our title sponsor as well, Evanov Communications, the second year of sponsoring this virtual format. I'm Gina Lawrence, and I chair the Education Liaison Committee, and I'm also a broadcast journalism professor at Fanshawe College. 10 schools from across the province are participating in today's career day. And the fact that you've shown up shows that you care about the profession, your future, and getting the gig, and also that your schools and professors do too. New this year, we have added a job board to our website, oab.ca, and it's going to be available for the rest of the month. You'll be able to see what careers are available and link through those full postings. And different points throughout the day, I'll add that link into the chat box, so you'll have access to that. Thank you to OAB's Val Skivington for putting this together. And thanks to our OAB membership for providing these opportunities for you. You have possibly been filling in a question board that we sent to you on how to stand out in your job search. And I'm going to head over there now just to see some of the reactions that we already have on how you are maybe going to be able to stand out, or how you will, I shouldn't say maybe, how you are standing out in your job search. So really, this is a day for you to find some focus, get some advice, have something that you want to take away. You already know that you have something special to offer. And all of our panelists today also want to hear what it is that you want to know, because we want you to get the gig. A big thank you to all of our moderators and panelists who are volunteering their time to help you get ahead. You're going to find information about each of our participants also on our oab.ca website. And I honestly want to thank also the organizing committee that I'm part of, consisting of Ward Smith, Jody Brooker, Wendy Gray, Doug Caldwell, Paul Thomas, and Val, who have put together 5 dynamic panels to share their expertise and answer your questions. We also this year have student ambassadors from some of our OAB member colleges who will appear on camera to help represent your interests and ask questions. But we also want you to ask questions. I'm going to just stop this, I think, and come back to you because I want to make sure that we're kind of focused on how this is going to work. So the panels are 40 minutes in length. And what we want you to do is there's a little Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. I mean, we're using the chat to have some conversations, but if you could use the Q&A, it helps us stay organized about what those questions are. And you also have the chance to upvote. Maybe someone else has already asked the question that you're wondering about. So support that one. And we'll make sure that between our student ambassador and also our moderators that we get the information that you're looking for. Yes, so anyhow, thank you for thinking about what it is that you have to offer. The best way for you to be involved is to have your questions and to connect. And we're going to take a break partway through the day for the presentation of the Michael Monty Student Scholarship Award. That's around 3:10. That will be followed by a break. And again, please make use of the Q&A box. This is all about you today. And getting fantastic advice, takeaways, and you're going to realize how collaborative this industry is as well and how transferable your skills are. Each panel will have some takeaway for you today, even if you don't think it's your area of expertise. So let's get underway with our first panel. It's a broad overview of getting the gig. And our moderator is Paul Ferguson with Starboard Communications, Vice President of Programming and Operations, and I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Gina. And it is really terrific to be a part of this panel again this year in the OAB's Career Day. You know, I've been in the business 27 years and change now, and Troy McCallum's video that kicked off the presentation today, that inspired me and been around the block a few times. And really, I hope you know, you guys were able to really absorb a lot of what Troy was saying there, because in just a few minutes, he was able to really encapsulate a lot of key points in getting the gig. And our goal on the panel here today is to take a lot of what Troy said and put it together with our own thoughts and really help you guys obtain that first entry-level job that you've spent the last couple of years studying to get. And as Gina said, and I'll echo this again, if this panel goes perfectly, you're going to be able to get our thoughts, but we want to spend the bulk of the next 40 minutes answering your questions. So please do go ahead and make great use of that Q&A board. I'll do my best to keep an eye on that and get to your questions and spend as much time as we can interacting with you folks who are with us today. What a pleasure to introduce the panel we've got today. And I'm going to introduce these folks and then I'm allow them a couple of minutes to explain a bit about their trail in life. And I'm going to start with a guy who I'm happy to call a friend and a mentor, even able to work with Tim Wieczorek a bunch of years ago. And he is the Executive Vice President of Radio for Torres Media. Welcome, Tim Wieczorek. Tim.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I guess to start my career started in 1980 at a station called Chez FM in Ottawa. Since then, I spent most of my time in Ottawa, but I'm, as you can tell, I'm not from an announcer background, but I've worked in about 4 markets in Eastern Ontario, not about, exactly 4 markets in Eastern Ontario. I've worked for big corporate companies, and I've worked for independents. They both have their advantages, and I can say that one's not better than the other to me, but they have different pluses and minuses. I think for me, My biggest ability was to mimic. I've done over my years is look at the people who are the best at it and copy them. I was saying on a sales meeting today to one of our groups that I've never had an original idea in my life. Most of them have been plagiarized, and and they evolve, right? And I think I love the industry. I've done it for a very long time. I wanted to get in the industry as a kid. I had a crystal radio way back in the day. Though out of high school, I worked in a factory, and in the late 70s, there was great money to be made in a paper mill. So, I quite didn't like shift work and working weekends and stuff like that. But it enabled me to get a brand new motorcycle in 1977, and it was a blast. I think the industry's evolved quite a bit. I think there's lots of stuff to do in it. And I think you've got to be open to change if you want to work in radio. I know when I was in college at Algonquin back in, I guess it was late 79 or early 80, I had a teacher named Barry McLaughlin. He was on the Air Force, CBC Air Force, and he taught us copywriting, and he asked me what I wanted to be. And I said, I want to be a radio copywriter. He asked me, what do they make? Do you know what they make? I said, I have no idea. He says, well, they don't make that much money. And he told me the amount yearly. And back then it was very small. And I said, who makes the most money? He said, salespeople. I said, okay, that's what I'm going to be. I didn't get out of the factory to go to college for 2 years to go back and make like half the money I was making in the factory. Actually, it was less than half. But anyways, I love the business. I think there's great people. I've made have lifelong friends. And if I give you one piece of advice, be polite, and that'll get you a long way. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Wendy Gray is with us today as well. Wendy is the General Manager and Director of News at CHGK and CJCS for Vista Radio. Welcome, Wendy.
Hi, thank you for having me today. Not a stranger to these panels, it seems, these days, but it's a thrill to be here and speaking with up-and-coming broadcasters. I started my career after graduating Loyalist. Shout out to Loyalist in 1993. I think I just missed you, Paul, by a couple of years. Yeah. And then I took a job back in my hometown. I took broadcast journalism at Loyalist, and my career started out as a host. I spun records, literal records, and CDs. There was no automation back in those days. And I stuck it out for quite a few years doing that, and also doing some swing shift for news and announcing and news reading. And then all of a sudden we got purchased, and I got sent on my way to Bracebridge to become the national news director for Halliburton Broadcasting. And Vista bought us and kept me on and made me director of news for Vista Radio. And so part of my success, I think, has been because I've been willing to move. I started out as an announcer. I wore a full-blown moose costume in the middle of summer, handing out samples. So I worked my time in promotions too, and then full-time into news, which has always been my passion. And I enjoy working in news and keeping that passion up for what's going on in the world and telling those stories. So yeah, be ready to move. Be ready to work in small markets. You know, everybody has this dream of moving to a large market, but I think it's something that we don't talk about enough. If you really want to affect change and you really want to put people on the radio that otherwise wouldn't be there, your best opportunity to do that is small and medium markets, as well as, you know, learning how to host, learning how to write a commercial, learning how to voice a commercial. It's all of those things that you get in small and medium markets that just make your resume shine. So that's
great.
Where I'm at.
Thanks, Wendy. Scott Pettigrew's here as well. Scott's station manager for Acadia Broadcasting. It's terrific to have you, Scott. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much, and honored to be here with the OAB. I am a graduate of Conestoga College, and excited to be sharing some of my wisdom that I have acquired, because I remember still fondly back to getting my first job paid at CJCS in Guelph, and working a summer job, and just like many here, did all nights and did whatever anybody asked, from sports to news to court reporter to hosting a show overnight. From there, went on to work in Stratford, then on to Blackburn radio for 25 years. And then I scared myself to death by going to Winnipeg to work for Chorus Radio and take on a major news talk operation there. I came up on the programming and news side, so a little different path to station manager. Most do come from the sales side, so it's a little different, but it's unique. And when I'm in my role now, to understand what's going on in the studios and in the newsroom, and how we're gearing our stations for that. But just to give you an idea, I had to jump off for a second because my engineer just came in and said our roof is leaking. That's the other things that come up sometimes. We're having a tremendous rainstorm here in Halifax, where I am. But Acadia Broadcasting, I just want to put a little plug in, because we're not well known in Southern Ontario. We have a number of stations from Thunder Bay to Kenora, and then also in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. And many of them are, to Wendy's point, small and medium sized stations. Halifax is our biggest operation, but a great entry point for a lot of grads from college, because we're in a position where we are hiring people with no experience to go to some of those smaller markets to do exactly what others have said: cut your teeth, be willing to learn and do every job in the station. I fondly remember back to Ted Rogers speaking at my college one year, our awards dinner. And Ted said, the best advice I ever heard was be somebody. And he said, be somebody who needs to do the dishes that are in the sink, or take that box of stuff out to the trash, or pick up that weekend promo, or put on the moose costume and go hand out stuff. Do that kind of stuff. Because I'll tell you now, as the station manager, the people who are doing that stuff and putting their hand up first to what they were saying on the video, those are the ones that make it very hard to get rid of down the road, because they're invaluable and they're the ones that are going places. The ones that are hiding and just coming in, doing their job, going home, there's very little space for that in our business anymore. You have to be multitasking all the time, because we just don't have enough people to have that luxury that we did early on in our career. And even then, I'm hesitant to say that, because I think that seems to be the way that's been for 35 years. Is you had to do everything back in the 80s and 90s as well. That hasn't really changed. But those are the people that are still in the business now.
Scott, I'm going to stick with you for a second if I can, because, and I encourage all the folks taking in the panels today to go and read the bios of everybody that speaks to you today, because there's great information in there. You folks with Acadia hired a lot of people. You just referenced that. You're still hiring people. So we have not only a group of new broadcasters about to hit the industry that are participating today, they're also competing with existing broadcasters in getting these jobs. So if you have, and we'll give everybody on the panel a chance to weigh in, but you're in the process right now. If you have all these people, what can the folks do? What's the single biggest thing they could do right now to help themselves stand out?
Yeah, great question. I think be interesting. That's the one thing that I think, if I'm trying to identify somebody who is going to especially be an on-air person or in news, you have to have a broad range of knowledge, and to be able to go from interviewing the local mayor to sometimes you're interviewing the prime minister to covering a sports event. Creating good content comes from having a lot of awareness of what's going on around you. So I'm honestly looking for deeper down in the resume, less about where you went to college and more about, were you on the high school debating team? Did you run for students council? Did you participate in elite athletics? Did you travel? Did you take a year off to go travel Europe? Those types of things I find very interesting, because if we can hire well-rounded, interesting people, it's hard to know how good I am as a program director giving air checks to make somebody who sits in their basement and plays video games all the time sound interesting to the day-to-day person who's listening to our radio station. So I'm looking for interesting. And if you can find ways on your resume and on your demo to show that you're interested and well-rounded, and not just this was, that is, that type of old school radio. We're looking for the differentiator right now for radio is what goes on in between the songs. If we can't create good content that is on multi-platforms, we're going to really be struggling. So those are the key things I'm looking for to get you to the interview.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Wendy, what would you add to that?
Well, I think Scott answered that excellent, but I look for a healthy sense of curiosity to go to Scott's point of being well-rounded. The one thing that if I get to the interview stage with an applicant, if you're not curious, if you don't know what markets you're applying for, if you don't know who I am, a little bit about me, and if you can't tell me what the top 2 news stories of the day are in Canada, then you're going to get booted out in about 5 minutes. But if you can show me that you've got a healthy curiosity, you ask me questions, you ask me questions about Vista, you ask me questions about why we do the things that we do, why do we have these news websites that are mostly about news. If you can prove to me that you've got a curiosity and that you're willing to learn and ask questions, then that makes you stand out to me. If it's just I ask a question, you answer it, and it's kind of like interviewing a politician, that's not interesting to me, and that makes me feel like you're not curious about what you've applied for.
Interesting. And we've got some questions in the Q&A board. And so, Tim, I'm going to turn to you with a couple of those, because again, if this next half hour goes perfectly, we're going to get a lot of interaction with students. And I believe the first question we got, I think we've handled from Devin, who asks about somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience to go on. What are you looking for in the resume or the demo for someone just starting out? And I think, Wendy, you and Scott have done a good job of talking about that. I'm going to bounce to the top, Tim, and go to you. And it comes from Jim Van Horn. And I think that's the Jim Van Horn who's one of my favorite broadcasters of all time. He says 15 seconds to make an impression on a demo. And he's referencing the video that Troy McCallum provided to open the session today. Jim's question is that the same with everyone? So, Tim, someone applies to you for Torres Media. Do you adhere to the 15 seconds to make the impression, or how do you handle that?
That's a great question. And, one of the things how do you cut through the clutter? It's the same for everybody, right? Like the amount of radio stations on the air right now, the amount of information that people are exposed to. There's lots of stuff out there. And how do you get through, and how do you get me to think about it? And I'll go before the resume. Now, the beauty today is almost every station in the world is streamed, right? So if you're looking to get in with Acadia or get in with us, have you listened to any of our stations, or Chorus or Rogers? And, have you reached out to somebody that's on air and said, hey, I'm a student here in the college, and I'd like to get in the business. And you're on the afternoon drive or evenings, and you could go look at different markets and say, could you do a critique of my tape? And a lot of people that aren't maybe in management, they'd love to do that. They've got the time. My problem is my time. Like, I get over 100 emails a day. So you can send me an email and just think it's quite possible I'll never see it. Like, how do you, and so, but if you send it to one of my announcers in one of my markets and say, hey, can you take a listen to this? Or I've got some copy here. And, they send it to the creative head at one of the stations, or a copywriter or a producer, and say, hey, I'd like you to critique my stuff. And then you ask that person, you got any jobs there? Hey, I could check the general manager, or I can check the whoever. and my employee walks into me and says, "Hey, I'd like you to look at this stuff." That's a pretty good shortcut. Like I just hired a young woman in Ottawa a few months ago, and how she got her stuff in front of me was a guy who works for me, and I hired him like 30 years ago at another station, and he volunteers at the food bank. And Daryl walks in, he calls me up on the phone one day. He says, "I got this guy that I know. I volunteer with him at the food bank, and he's got a younger sister that's in the program at Algonquin, and she's looking for an internship." And I said, "Well, what's he like?" He's a really good guy. He runs, he works at the food bank. And anyways, he sent me the stuff. I listened to it. And I felt that, listening to her work, her on air, that like she had a very cool kind of tenor for a rock station. And so I said, "Yeah, I'll take you on for an internship." And it was really fast. And now I've hired her. But it didn't come to me directly. She had an advocate. And I don't know if she did it on purpose. I never asked her that question. But if I'm out there, when I was out there, like as a rep, I knew all the reps in the city. You network, like who could help you? Like who's an influencer on me? I think that's, you got to start looking at other things rather than going at things directly. Sometimes, you got to look at some side opportunities where it's not as crowded, like there's an evening jock somewhere and you send them a tape and you listen to them, but you can listen to, like, there's so many good stations online, right? Like I tune into, there's some American stations that I tune in, especially for our rock station. I listen to Paul's station for country, but I also listen to CJJR out of Vancouver. It's, I listen to a lot of radio, and I just don't listen to it in my market. I listen, because I'm always on the search for talent, so that would be my answer to it. Like, you could stand it. How do you get to me? Well, the best way to get to me is through somebody else. Though, people, it's not that I don't want to talk to you and I don't want to see your stuff. It's just, especially in the last 2 years, we've shrunk our staff and we're trying to make it through this pandemic. It looks, and your timing's good because we're looking, in the next year, we're looking at growth. We're looking to grow our teams. And so your timing's really good to probably get in the industry now. And I'm going to be looking for new people. Because you have like the young people have different ways of viewing things and looking at things, and they bring different ideas. So I think it's a really cool time, despite the challenges. Anyways, I hope that answers the question, Paul.
Yeah, it's good. No, and that's uplifting to hear. And I do want to drive home one thing you said I think was really, really great is that, you don't necessarily just have to go to the person at the top. You can make contacts with employees throughout the company. And all of a sudden, you've built a bit of a network within the company. That employee could very well go to you and say, "Hey, I had this person reach out and I think their stuff's pretty good." Now they've got an ambassador on the inside.
Exactly.
So I think for the students on today, that's good advice. Scott, let me go to you for another question from Jim, and it's about references. And it says, do you check references? And if so, what are the top 2 or 3 questions that you would ask to a reference?
I'm going to answer that because we do check references. It's mandatory for our company. I want to just go back to demos though for a second. Customize your demo for the station you're applying to. It is so easy to edit audio now. It is so easy to learn, to Wendy's point, what are the top stories in Bracebridge or Stratford or wherever you're going. Tell me how you would do local content. And going that extra mile gets you to listen past 15 seconds. Because now at least you made an effort versus mass emailing me. So now, as far as references, yeah, one of the things that we're looking for, Jim, is definitely that attitude of being willing to go above and beyond. That's the piece there. If you've got to be chasing them up and down the halls for work to be completed, that type of stuff, are they diligent? Are they interesting? Are they a good team player? Those are initially for young broadcasters. That's what we're looking for, the people that have that potential. And I think we all see it in the business now of who, it's not hard to spot the talent that is going above and beyond. I know we had somebody that we hired in Thunder Bay that the references just came back glowing, and people going, I knew she wasn't staying here long because she's that good. And I'm glad that she's going from our evening weekend person to your afternoon drive person. We all as broadcasters understand the industry survives by giving good references to the good people and helping them go along, because we all tell everybody, you've got to be willing to move. But that's the network we have. Wendy, Gina, many of the people on this call have been friends of mine for a long, long time. And I know when I call Wendy, Greg, we're going to share honestly what that person is and who they are. So it is a small industry when it comes to that. I hired a guy in Winnipeg that I didn't know, but I knew all three of his references, and he had never worked east of Saskatchewan and I had never worked west of Manitoba, but I knew all three of his references and two of them had worked for me. That's how small a business this is, because everybody ends up being in Fort Mac for a while or something like that.
I want to piggyback something you just said, Scott, and turn it to Wendy and ask this. How do you feel, Wendy, when you see on a resume? Because Scott said he's hired somebody based on the fact that he knew all three of the references. So when you see on a resume references available upon request, do you believe that that's somebody leaving money on the table?
Good question. I would like to see references included. More references available on request does nothing for me. As Scott says, if I see Scott Pettigrew, I might not even go to the interview stage if their resume has caught my attention to actually get down to the references section. I might, if I see Scott's name on there, I might call Scott and say, hey, got this resume. Tell me what you know about this person. So yeah, it really helps, because as Scott said, the industry is so small that chances are I will know somebody on the resume. To the other question about on resumes about using professors, to me, I probably know your professor if you're in a broadcast journalism program. So I will have that frank conversation, but I would rather speak to past employers. I don't care if it's somebody that you babysat for, or somebody that was your manager if you were stocking shelves in a grocery store. I want to speak to past employers. I want to know, were you punctual? Were you respectful? Would they hire you again? That's a very telling answer. And I'll tell you a very short story. We're hiring, by the way, so if you're interested, Vista's hiring. But I asked a reference check from a person that I hired just out of school not too long ago. And I said, would you hire him again? And she said to me, absolutely not. And I said, really, why? Because this is not the job for him. He needs a job in radio. That's where he is passionate. I tell you, he's been with us for about 8 months now, and I wish I had 12 more of them, because he's just that good, and he's right straight out of school. So that's a really important question. If they had said, nah, kind of lazy and disrespectful, well, then that would have been a different thing. But just that answer, no, he needs to be in radio, got him that job.
Interesting stuff. Alexandra from Durham asks a question I think we've touched on, but if anybody wants to weigh in quickly on this, because I want to get to as many of these questions as we can. Is it best to sell yourself as really good at one thing or decently good at a lot of things? And I'll say, going back to Troy's opening video, you want to be, put it in sports terms, a bit of a 5-tool player as best you can, right? You want to be as good as often as you can be at as many things as you can be. Anybody have any quick thoughts on that?
I'll jump in, Paul. I think it being, because I'm a guy that was not great at anything, good at a lot of things, and it probably got to me where I am today. So I do like those people. Right now, if you have graphic skills, if you have video editing skills, a lot of that kind of stuff now is all part of content production, your ability to do some production, because somebody may be on vacation, or there's opportunities to jump in, or in some of our cases, you're doing all of those in one role. So don't downplay any of those extra things, and especially whether it's your TikTok experience or different things like that, all of that daily content, you now have so many other places where you can create content. And that for some of us, we're looking to hire and add that skill set. Just with one of our news people has a secondary job as a professional photographer, but her photography and eye for photos has made our news website so much better. So little things like that you think may not be relatable, having an eye for visual right now, because we're not just radio anymore. We are multi-content platform providers, and our websites and our YouTube videos and all of that all come into that. So yeah, don't underplay some of those other skill sets.
Well said, Scott. Tim, Hussam from Fanshawe asks this question. And I'm coming to you specifically because, again, you talk about how, you had applied for a copy job when you were early days of your career, and then you found out salespeople make more money, so you did a quick turn. His question is, how do you deal with learning something that you didn't necessarily intend to pursue? For example, his example is wanting to be a radio announcer and all of a sudden learning sales work. And Scott, you probably have some compelling information on that too. But Tim, I'll start with you on that.
Well, I think if any job in radio is sales, like if you're, if you go to your boss and you want to do something, you got to sell them on it, or you got to present the benefits of you doing that. Like the copy, well, that was actually, I didn't apply for copy. I was still in the classroom then, but I'm open to doing anything. Like you've helped me with it, but I'm programming stations now. I'm picking music. I'm scheduling music. Like, I'm a sales guy. You can, and I didn't learn it. Like, I'm 65 and I didn't learn how to do that stuff until in my 60s or late 50s, right? I always hung out. I think, in the radio station, what I always liked about the radio station was the people I worked with. I always took an interest in their jobs, back in the day, watching in production, the guy cut tape. Like, that always amazed me, how they could cut tape and make it match up. It was like just mind blowing to me. But take an interest in other people and what they do. You'll be surprised what that you'll have a flair for that you never thought you did. Yeah, it's tough. It depends on people, right? Like Wendy said earlier, like, she doesn't want to talk to teachers. I want to talk to teachers. Like, personally, I think they see them every day, and they know how they get along with others, how they behave in the hallways and that stuff. And everybody's different. Like, and to assume that the answers I've given you is what Scott wants to see, it might not be like that. But I just think you got to be open, and that's as the industry changes and evolves, because it's never going to stand still, and you got to be ready to adapt. And if you don't adapt, then you should do something else, I think.
Scott, you and I are in a comparable situation where, I'm in a VP role and you're a station manager, and we both come out of the programming side, but you start to take on all departments in the building. So how did you tackle that when you all of a sudden had to take on other responsibilities?
Yeah, the part that really scared me was when I took on the role of station manager in Thunder Bay, and about 2 months into it, my sales manager left, and I didn't come from the sales side. And I had to quickly realize that I had to do a lot of learning, because that was probably the one area of the business I didn't know, but it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because I had to figure it out. But to your point, because I knew what good creative was, I knew how a commercial got from sales to air and what a good frequency was and all those types of things. I knew a lot of things on the back end side of how radio works, and I believed in the product, and I was able to teach, because a lot of our salespeople don't come from a journalism or a broadcasting school. most of the salespeople I hire have no previous radio history. So I have to teach them how to believe in the product. And that's becoming more and more difficult as less young people are listening to the radio and have other opportunities. It's not like they grew up with it. So that's been a challenge going forward. But I think that's the ability to have a broad knowledge of all the different areas of the business and take curiosity. We invite our staff, if they're in programming, come to a sales meeting. If they're in sales, come to a programming meeting. Doing all those types of things so that they learn, because we talk about it every day. To your point, Tim, everybody in our staff is in sales. Everybody is responsible for revenue. You know, it's not just the salespeople over here and programming over here. We have to break down those barriers. Everybody is responsible. And I, in fact, just had an announcer 2 weeks ago, just sold $1,500 in advertising. And he came to me and goes, "Can I sell this?" And I go, "Yeah." And will you pay me commission? I go, "Yeah." Like, we do revenue. Like, you don't have to have a sales title to sell something. And I said, "Yeah, we're good. We have to figure out new ways." And it doesn't even have commercials. It's all about a sports betting site that he had a previous relationship with from when he worked with the CFL. So those are the types of things now where we're hiring people that understand how we create content and is there a value for it for a client, and understanding that. So we're having to reinvent what revenue is. So I'm getting a little further off the path, Paul, but to answer the question, yeah, multitasking and understanding the whole business will help you go a long way.
Certainly. Wendy, I want to turn to you for a couple of, and certainly feel free to weigh in with any of your thoughts on what Tim and Scott were talking about, but there's a couple of questions I'd love to get your take on. And one of them comes from, I hope I'm getting this right, it's Aya Lucas. And it says, "I'm just trying to come out of my shell, so to speak. I've been pretty shy all throughout school. Do you think there's still hope for someone who may or may not have been very social and active in the past?" And that's a great question for somebody just coming out of the program.
I think it's true that a lot of radio people and broadcasters in general are pretty introspective when we're not in front of a mic. I think we can be pretty private people and pretty not social, I think. So that's not a hindrance, I don't think. I know a lot of my colleagues in the industry that are very private people, mostly because we talk on a microphone and people think that you know, we're their friends and they own a part of us, which is the magic of radio, actually. But I think the only thing that you have to be concerned about is, can you pick up a phone? Can you do an interview, whether you're, you know, I don't know what your particular vocation is, but whether it's news or whether you're on the air, you know, you still need to be able to pick up a phone and ask questions, whether you're interviewing the mayor, the prime minister, or the organizer of the Terry Fox run. You need to be able to have that much social skill that you can speak to them, be comfortable, be confident in what you're asking and what your discussion is moving forward. But do you have to be really social? No, you just have to be able to do your job and be in front of people, ask questions, and then you can go home, still maintain that curiosity that we talked about, right? That interest and stuff, be well-rounded. Don't just go home and play video games. You still need to maintain that curiosity, but you can do that on your own. You don't have to have 100 friends.
And Wendy, we've got lots of questions, by the way, and it's so great that you folks are so active on the Q&A board. We'll do our best to plow through as many as we can. Tim, I think I saw your hand up, though. You want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, like in Ottawa, there was in the late 80s, we hired a guy at a station named Doc Halen, and Doc Halen was terrified of being in public. Well, that's not his real name, but that was his on-air name. Went with Van Halen, right? But he just retired 2 years ago. He you know, went on 54 Rock, became the Bear, and then Shay stole him from Standard. And he was probably one of the best rock jocks in his time, right? On the radio. And he, socially, like that in public was not his skill, but man, one of the things was he was observant. he was observant what other people were doing. He had comment on it, and not in a degrading way, but in a humorous way. Like it was a pretty strong jock, and had a great following, great on social media. So like how you are, like if you're behind the mic, you just, some people are okay with that. And I know I've worked with other jocks that, they couldn't do this right now, what we're doing. But you get them behind a mic and they'll do a remote, but you need a salesperson there to sort of say hi to everybody for them. But anyways, that's all I wanted to add. So there's room for everybody. Every different types of personality, backgrounds and everything. It's don't be worried about stuff like that.
Well said. Just a few minutes left, so I'll bang through as many as I can here. And certainly I'm going to do my best to make sure we hit the ones that pertain to getting that first gig in the business, which, is the focus of our panel. I wish we had all day. Here's one that I'd love to quickly get everybody's thoughts on. Do you check applicants' social media, and what role does it play in hiring? And social media is a big tool in what we all do. And it's also a bit of a resume and a peek inside of someone's head in and of itself. Scott, let me start with you.
Yes, we check it mostly for maturity in young broadcasters. So if your feed is full of drunken parties and that kind of stuff, that's probably going to be a negative. We're looking again. Did you travel? Did you, do you look like you're social in some areas and different things? Do you have some interesting photos and some content there that's interesting? But yes, we do check it.
Tim?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I creep them.
Wendy?
Absolutely. Yes, and same things that Scott looked for. I'm looking for content. I'm not looking for, party pictures. And if I'm hiring specifically for news, I'm looking for well-rounded social media posts, balance. I'm not looking for somebody who is on one side or the other. That is definitely a flag for me.
Interesting stuff. There's another a question here from Todd Allison. Most of us are looking at going into radio right out of school and for internships. However, what if our ultimate goal isn't in radio, but an adjacent industry like podcasting or film or writing, editing? So all the skills these folks have obtained throughout their time, maybe the internships in radio, but do you guys have any suggestions as to how they can take advantage of the internship to take those skills, grow them, and apply them somewhere else? Wendy?
Never turn down a good internship, but never. And be honest. If that's what your future holds for you, or that's what your future aspiration is, then be honest with the person that's giving you the internship. Because as we've made this point, I might know somebody who's into podcasting and making a lot of money at it, or I might know somebody in the film industry. In fact, we had a person working for us in one of our stations that has moved on to the documentary film industry. I could, hook you up with that person. You could get a mentorship or a mentor from the people that we know in this industry. So it's being honest. Let us know what your end goal is. In fact, that's one of the questions that I ask in my interviews, and I think I probably asked it to Amanda, who's up on the next panel, because she worked for me, and look where she's gone now. But it's when you're getting ready to retire, you're 65 years of age, and you're getting ready to retire. And I always laugh at that because we probably won't at 65. But what job are you leaving? What job are you leaving? And that gives me an idea of, I've had things range from I want to be a sports broadcaster to I want your job, all kinds of stuff. But that gives you an idea of the motivation of the person and where they want to go and how you can help guide them there.
Hey, Tim, there, go ahead there. I think you would like to.
Yeah, like for the, like if both Scott and I worked for Chorus, and I guess I've worked there for almost 15 years, right? And the podcasting and other things, like we spent a fortune at Chorus in the pre-2015 on digital, all things internet. We spent a lot of money, So like, just because you have an interest in a different area, that's a good thing to know, because we want more podcast content. We just don't, we're not there yet where we want to be, but it's something we want to grow. It's something we want to get more involved in. So like, don't assume because that, maybe you'll come to us, and because you have that skill, we can invest in that area and start to develop it. So that's like Scott said earlier, like there's all kinds of content that we're running. So podcasts are right in our wheelhouse.
Scott, any thought on that?
Yeah, I think every broadcaster right now is looking for other revenue streams and trying to find different ways to monetize that. So don't assume that we're not looking at acquiring another business that goes into that content. To Tim's point, that podcasting or figuring out how to make money from YouTube or other things that align with our business already. So again, I think we're all on the same page that if you can produce interesting content, whether that's for news or for programming or for websites, those are the people that are going to be getting jobs.
Well, we still have so many unanswered questions. I think if I can invite you folks, and I'll go around the horn and have you guys give the 30-second wrap up, so that on the way out the door, our students, have the pre-seed down version. What are those things you really want the students to take away that are going to help them get the gig? Wendy.
Curiosity, passion, knowledgeable, do your research, know who you're applying to and what you're applying for, and the community you're applying in, specifically if it's in a news role. And be honest. Just be honest about what you are, what you think you're really good at, and where you need to grow. Because we've all been there. We've all just graduated from college, and boy, oh boy, we all had a lot of things to learn and still learn. And don't be afraid to say, I have this talent I think is missing from your company, right? Because not only should we have mentors that are older and more experienced than us, but we should also have people that are coming up behind us that can teach us new stuff too, because we're all little dogs and we need to be taught to.
Well put, Tim. What's your 30-second piece of advice for the folks to take away today?
Be a good listener, be curious, be an ongoing learner, always never stop learning. I've often said the day I stop learning is this day I'm going to stop working. So hopefully that I won't ever stop working. And be a team player. Be polite, be nice, be a good person, when you can. That doesn't mean you're always going to agree with people or get along with people, but I think you want to be polite, nice, a learner, and believe what you believe and speak the truth and walk the truth. That's what I think.
Scott.
I know we're almost out of time, so I'll be real quick. Smart, humble, and hungry. If I can identify those three things, smart, humble, and hungry, you're going to be probably moving to the next level, because I know you're going to grow in our business.
What a pleasure to be surrounded with minds far greater than mine today. Thank you so much, Scott Pettigrew, Tim Wieczorek, and Wendy Gray. You folks that are listening in today, thank you so much. And if there's anything we can do, even in a typed way, to answer the questions we couldn't get to, if we can do that, we'd be happy to do that. And I will say this, you folks, by participating today, have just made 4 new contacts within the folks that are on the panel here today. Don't be afraid to reach out and follow up. It's an important thing to mine real value out of the conference today. So again, to Scott, to Tim, to Wendy, thank you guys a ton for your expertise today. Again, it's easy to moderate a panel when you've got 3 pretty incredible minds. And so thank you guys. The next panel coming up in moments is News, Talk, and Podcasting. And it's my pleasure to introduce your next moderator. Coming up shortly, Scott Kitching.
All right, I'm looking for Scott. Thank you so much, first of all, to our Getting the Gig panel. You've really set the tone and given us so much to think about on this. We may have some technical problem getting Scott on here, so I may jump in, but please, with the panel who is up for news, talk, and podcasting, you can turn on your cameras. Hello, Amanda. Hello, Jeremy.
Hi.
Hi, Mark, and hello, Amy.
Hi.
I'm going to have you introduce yourselves, and I can get the conversation also rolling while we're waiting for Scott to hopefully join in on this one. But I do obviously want to point out we have a student ambassador who is joining us on this panel as well. So we will be going to Amy occasionally on this, but let's pop around, and Amanda, if you could start.
Sure thing. Thank you. So my name is Amanda Cupido. I am currently the Director of Talk and Talent at AM 640 Toronto, which is a Chorus station. And so I'm overseeing the newsroom, the producers, and the board operators, and of course the hosts at that station. Previously, I launched a podcast production company called Lead Podcasting. And so that was creating branded and original podcasts, and that company is still going. I'm also the author of Let's Talk Podcasting, the essential guide to doing it right. And I've had the pleasure of teaching at both X University and Seneca College in their School of Journalism and teaching radio and podcasting. I have some previous experience in communications, and my roots are in radio, where I worked as a producer, an anchor, and a reporter. So lots to share, and I'm excited to get into it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Mark, let's head over to you next.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So I'm Mark Legier, and I'm the Director of News Content for Acadia Broadcasting, which has 15 radio stations from Northern Ontario to Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. And I'm also the editor of a digital business news publication called Huddle, and Acadia Broadcasting owns Huddle, which is how I came into the job that I'm in now. I was actually the editor of Huddle, and then got offered the opportunity to take over both the news content role for Acadia Broadcasting as well. My roots are actually I studied at Ryerson to go into magazine journalism. And like a lot of journalists, and I'm sure this subject will come up as we go on this panel, I took many different turns in my career. I started out in newspapers, moved to CBC radio, then moved into digital media with a cannabis culture publication called Civilized. And I went from there to Huddle, and then now back to radio with Acadia Broadcasting. So I've kind of meandered, I like to say.
Sounds like everyone's moving around. I love this mix up of platforms and how we're using things. Jeremy, welcome.
Welcome, and thank you all for joining us today. I'm relatively new to radio. Simply put, this was a career change for me. I was a chef. I ran fine dining kitchens for about 25 years before I decided I needed something new. I needed a change, and I found that in radio broadcasting. I went to Humber College, where I did a double internship, one at Sirius XM for their Canada Talks channel 167, and also as a news intern for 96.9 Radio Humber. My first job out of the gate was at Global News Radio, 640 Toronto, where I was hired as a part-time board op, but in my interview, it came to light that they needed a weekend news anchor, and I had a solution for them. And that's how I got to be my very first weekend news anchor gig. From that, I was presented an opportunity at Zoomer Media, where I am to this day, operating as the weekend news anchor, but I also anchor throughout the different day parts. I also am technical producer for Fight Back with Libby Znaimer, which is, of course, a current events talk show that is also turned into a podcast at the end of each episode. And that's been a nutshell.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, Jeremy. Amy, introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my name's Amy Simon. I'm a second-year broadcast journalism student at Fanshawe College. On top of that, I'm also a reporter and the podcast host for Fanshawe Student Union paper called The Interrobang. And today I am your student ambassador for the News Talk and Podcasting section of the Career Day. And really, Gina said it in the beginning, but my job is to really help with questions and answer some too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. While we're waiting for Scott to get connected in, Please throw some questions. We want to spend the time getting the answers that you want for this. And I know that there had been some questions in the previous panel a little bit related to how much maybe podcasting is becoming part of what's happening within even newsrooms and the sort of intersection of news and talk and podcast. And then also obviously that editorial component, but also objective news and all of this stuff coming together. But Amy, I'll start off with you in terms of how important is podcasting, or how do you get into that area?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't speak as much as I know some of our other panelists will be able to today. I've only been in it for about 6 months, but yeah, it's been incredible. It's definitely different than regular reporting or interviews that I've done in the past, especially for getting news stories. It's more of a conversation. I personally love that. I love really diving into a subject with someone and getting to the root of what we're talking about, but also learning a little bit more about them in the process and who they are. And yeah, it's been a great experience. And I think it's really important in a sense of journalism and everything that we will be talking about early on today. I don't know if Amanda or Jeremy can add on to that. I don't have as much experience, but I'd love to hear more from them. So yeah.
Let's head over to Amanda on this. And it is a different way of being able to not be maybe in the time constraints necessarily, or how you have that conversation, and everything does intersect a little bit on this.
For sure. And Amy, don't downplay your 6 months. That's longer than a lot of people. So you are still helping to define the industry, which is evolving every day and every week. It's really an exciting time. I think there's a lot to consider with regard to the intersection of podcasting and radio. I think podcasting, at its heart has a lot of similarities to radio. Audio as a whole is an intimate medium. People feel that they really are connected with hosts that they listen to in their ears, and it's really special. And so I think that for sure it is the foundation of it all, and why I think radio still exists and why podcasting is so popular. But we do see a lot of differences where each of the mediums can play to their strengths. So with radio, you have this live element where a caller can call in and change the course of a conversation or add some information that could never have been planned. And that live interaction can't really be emulated in the podcast form as we know it. So that's a superpower of radio, and this live, quick turnaround energy to it. Whereas podcasting, one of the brilliant elements of that is Gina was mentioning, there's no time constraints. I think with radio, we're always set to be out at a time and news at a time. And that's what makes radio great. People know what to expect when. But when I'm creating podcasts, I like to say, when people say, well, what's the best length of a podcast? No, there is no best length. It's what is the story and how long does it deserve? You tell me how long you think this episode should be, and every episode can be different. And so I think that really blows open a lot of possibilities for creativity. And so sometimes when we're looking at this intersection of radio and podcasting, I think a lot of radio folks take their formulaic knowledge of radio and apply it to podcasting. And sometimes it doesn't always land because it is a bit of a different beast. So it's a matter of taking the foundational pieces that do translate to both, but then honoring the specific medium that you're working in order for you to be able to reap the benefits of the two differences.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to pop over to Mark then, because you've done that sort of digital and into the broadcasting world, and it's been a different intersection of how that storytelling is taking place. Oops, you're on mute, Mark.
That's just the first time that's going to happen. Really, sorry about that. Definitely defer to Amanda, certainly a lot of her podcasting experience, because it's really, really deep. Mine is, I have some experience in podcasting. Actually, my first quote podcast that I think I hosted, it was at a campus, on a campus radio station in New Brunswick in 2009. And I actually just used I hate to say this, the campus radio station, I used their station as my studio. Already back then, even though we had a show on the university radio station, I already knew that the audience was moving online. Soon knew that I was going to be capturing most of the audience for that show that we aired, live on a campus radio station online. And personally, I probably share this with others on the panel, Amanda and Amy, but my biggest passion right now is podcasting as a listener. It's actually where I consume most of my media. I'd say 90% of the time I spend as a consumer is with podcasting. I admit that, being a radio person and a digital writing person. So for me, a lot of the last few years has been about trying to find, and again, I'd love to get Amanda's thoughts on this, finding the business opportunity, because I know for a lot of you coming out of school now, moving into your first jobs, your second jobs, your third jobs, you're going to find the business landscape is changing enormously, and it will dictate how podcasting evolves. As podcasting tries to find its place, there's a lot of really successful podcasts financially, but there's a lot of them too that are really popular, but haven't found a way to pay for themselves yet. So as a journalist and somebody with a passion for podcasting, I'm curious to see how that plays out. For me, and I think I'm just saying the same thing Amanda said. For me, storytelling at the heart is and exploring important issues in our communities is at the heart of everything we do, whether we work for a newspaper, report for a radio station, or produce a podcast. So to Amanda's point, it's all about finding the best place to tell a story and the best place to engage an audience. And I think that really does vary according to the medium and who you're trying to reach. So, but I'm one of these people, to your original question, who I just have a passion for storytelling and for the exploration of ideas and community issues. So that's why I'm just interested in all the mediums, because I reach audiences differently.
Yeah, and I think
whether I'm writing or whether I'm broadcasting.
Yeah, I think that is the great point of this panel, is there are so many different ways and places to be able to tell these stories and have just really good content, whether it's contained within a newscast or it's available on a website or it's in a longer form storytelling. All of that works. Welcome, Scott, to the panel. I'll be turning it over to you. I know I haven't gone to Amy yet with any questions to see if there's anything that she would like to. And Jeremy, we need to give a bit of an opportunity as well to talk a little bit about his role and some of the storytelling advice that he would have for our students. But please introduce yourself, Scott, and thank you for joining us.
Yes, sorry for my tardiness, everyone. I was having some internet issues. I've been working from home and occasionally having to deal with some outages, and of course one came along right as we were about to get started. So after a couple of reboots, everything's good, hopefully, for the next 30 minutes or so. So as Gina mentioned, my name is Scott Kitching. I'm the news manager for Blackburn Media for London, Windsor, and Chatham. My job also includes sort of being, I guess you could say, the editor of londonnewstoday.ca, as well as cknewstoday.ca and windsornews.ca. Yeah, let's go. Actually, enough about me. Let's go to one of our panelists. And Jeremy, tell us a little bit about yourself and your entrance into this business, because it came a little bit later.
Yes, it did. We have touched on that. It was a career change for me that, well, it made sense at the time, coming from a background running kitchens into well, radio. What I would love to touch on is just regarding podcasting, which we've been chatting about. The thing and the blurred line, if you will, between radio and podcasting. In my role, serving as technical producer for the current events talk show Fight Back with Libby Znaimer, it is live on air from noon to 1 every weekday, but within half an hour to 35 minutes afterwards, it is up and ready to be accessed as a podcast. Our demographic for our stations is 45 and everything above. And something that I do, part of my role, is fielding emails and from listeners. And something that happens almost every week is a dedicated listener who missed an episode where they were talking about, for instance, you had a doctor on talking about new cancer research and I missed it. How can I get such great pleasure in being able to send this email reply with the link to the podcast saying, here's what you missed, enjoy it. And to me, the power that we have with that to be just speaking to intimacy of radio, which we can now extrapolate with the podcasting, it's no end of opportunities, and I love it.
Sorry, Gina, you had said you wanted to go to Amy, correct?
Well, I think that Amy has some questions prepared on behalf of students that we could go to. Well, we just get settled and look through the Q&A, which is hopping. We're trying to sort through some of the things that have been asked or not. So Amy, why don't you fire a question at the panel that is on your mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I got a ton here, and I saw a lot of them repeated in the question or the Q&A section already, but one that was pretty big from our students and one that I see popping up here in the Q&A, talking about podcasting, but really the topic and how to know or how to choose a good topic for a podcast episode and how to know when it's niche enough, but not too niche. So I would love to go to any one of you who have maybe using from your own experiences about how you find topics and what to cover for your podcast.
Amanda, would you like to take this one first?
Sure. Yeah, it's a bit of a loaded question because it really does depend. So I think, and I saw that in the chat too, how niche is too niche. So I'm going to start there. I think podcasts are amazing because they're global. Here's another difference between radio and podcasting. Podcasts, you're getting downloads from all around the world. And yes, you could stream a radio station and from anywhere too, but you're actually appearing on charts and coming up. And you'll find that even people in Australia, half of the podcasts they listen to are American podcasts. And same with Canada. Half of the podcasts we listen to are American podcasts. And that wouldn't necessarily be the same for radio. I wouldn't say half of Canadian radio listeners are listening to American radio stations, right? So it does skew to a more global audience, which is great because you have all this access. But then it misses out on those beautiful niche stories. I think a lot of times when people are making a podcast, they're thinking, wow, this could be listened anywhere. So let me try to make it as broad as possible so I can bring in all English speaking people potentially, which is wonderful. But then that's where you start butting up against the millions and millions of other podcasts that are out there. And then it's really hard to stand out. And so what I've been recommending to my students and fellow peers who have been wanting to create a new podcast or niche down, in Canada, we see that the research shows that Canadian listeners want more Canadian content. And right now, there's only a handful of places they can really go to. So if you are on your own and there's tons of independent podcasters in the United States, and in Canada, I think it's been a bit tougher for some of our independent producers to really break through. And so what I would say is if you are an independent who is wanting to make your own podcast, and you're wanting to hopefully, make an impact on the charts, I would say even just like thinking as niche as Canada. So if you want to do a podcast about, internet and gaming, what about internet and gaming in Canada? And what does that look like? And just putting that sort of a niche, you can get even more niche. I listen to Gary Vee from time to time, although he's a bit boisterous, he does have some really innovative ideas. And one of his notes in the podcast space is to talk about business and even business in a hyper local sense. What does business look like in Toronto? What does business look like in Halifax? And creating a podcast that's niche to a city or a region and interviewing the change makers in that area. It still does have appeal broad, other people in Canada might want to hear what's happening in Halifax business scene, right? So you can actually go from a geography perspective. Start there when you think about going niche. But as in general, when thinking about a topic, you just have to think about, like radio, this is where it's not different. You put yourself in your audience's shoes and you go, what matters to them? What do they want to hear about? And then depending on how often you publish or where you're publishing, if it's a daily podcast, your topic will change because it'll have to be something of the day. If it's more of an evergreen podcast, then you're going to be able to want to pick a topic that's going to have some life and breathe for more than a day or a week. And you'll have to think about that as you're thinking about the topic, but always putting yourself in your audience's shoes, whoever that audience is, whoever you think is listening or whoever you want to listen, and think what would matter to them and what do they want to hear about. And hopefully that will help you pick your topic.
Mhm. Does anyone else want to weigh in on this particular question, or shall we go on to the next one? Mark, Jeremy, either of you?
I'll just offer a few thoughts, just based on what Amanda said. It really is, it's about figuring out who your audience is, and then even the even tougher part, thinking about how to reach them, right? Like that's one of the biggest challenges, because for a lot of people, even the younger demographics, it can be hard to reach. You can create the podcast, but it can be hard to reach them. But to Amanda's point around finding your audience, like I just know for us, with Huddle, we've created two business podcasts, right? And one of them I actually create and host, and it's around interviewing creators and entrepreneurs in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. And I have to say it's the hardest part, and that's why I bring it back to a lot of this to audience. The hardest part is actually reaching them and figuring out how to attract new listeners, because when we podcast now is a very entrepreneurial enterprise, right? It's not, even if you were in an established radio business or newspaper business, it's very entrepreneurial in terms of building programming and then finding the audience for that programming. And for some older, I know Amanda's run her own company, so she knows this the hard one way. It can be hard for big companies and established companies to think about building new products, and podcasts are presenting a real challenge for media outlets around North America. But for you, also thinking about, your first jobs, coming out of school, you'll bring a lot of experience and perspective into workplaces on how to do this right. And in a lot of ways, we probably have a lot of opportunity if you think carefully about the kinds of podcasts you want to create and where you would find your audiences. You'll actually find opportunity in media outlets, I think, to be part of building up podcasting as part of a business, whether it's a small business or a large business. I know we're going through those conversations inside Acadia right now, and we are looking to a lot of the younger people in the company to bring that perspective and experience, to their jobs.
Mm-hmm. I want to go to a question. This is from Bianca Tassie Ann. And Mark, I'd like to stay with you for this question. And I think I may, when you're finished, offer a little bit of input as well. But the question is, as a beginner in news reporting, what do employers look for in a person with no industry experience? So if you get a resume and a cover letter and a demo from someone who is perhaps just a recent grad, has not worked in the industry as yet, what, if anything, in that resume and demo are you looking for, Mark, in terms of, this is someone I could consider hiring even though they have no experience? Is there any kind of quality that you might see that would kind of make you think, yes, this is someone I'll take a chance on?
Yeah, can I answer that question with a personal story?
Of course, please do.
I think I told this story to you guys when I was in a call last week. Because it's a great question. My first job was as a newspaper reporter in Halifax, and I was a sports reporter, and that was in 1992, 91, and I actually I had a liberal arts degree, and I was working in a garden center of all places in Halifax with an English degree. And I had just come back from traveling overseas. I'd been in India for 6 months, and I saw a little ad in a newspaper, in the Daily News, which is a newspaper that no longer exists in Halifax. And it was a little ad in the classifieds that was advertising for a sports reporter. And I was like, I'd love to write. I love sports. Hadn't set foot in a journalism school. Applied for this job, and I would have been 23 at the time, I'm going to say. And I got an interview, and I got on a short list of 2 candidates. I talked my way to the top of the list with, how committed I was doing well in this job, how passionate I was about writing, how passionate I was about sports, how open I was to learning. And I finished second in this contest for this job, and I get a phone call late at night from the sports editor, and to tell me that I had a great interview, but they'd chosen somebody else over me. And I spent a few minutes on the phone with the sports editor at the time saying, thanks for the opportunity, really wanted this opportunity, understand that you found somebody that you thought was more suited than me. If he doesn't work out, give me a call. And I hung up the phone, was disappointed, went out for a drink in downtown Halifax, came back a few hours later, and there was a message on my phone, and it was the sports editor. I called him back, and because of our phone call, he actually never called the winning candidate. He changed his mind based on our phone call, and he offered me the job. No experience, I talked my way in. But for me, it's a long answer to your question, Scott. What I learned from that is my passion and my commitment to learning and really wanting the job. Like I can't put it any other way. And confidently saying I could do it and learn it was enough to get my foot in the door. And I'll end this answer by saying a few years later, what I learned from that experience, a few years later, I actually started my own newspaper and built my own team. And we actually hired a lot of people that didn't have journalism degrees. And what you'll hear a lot now is the journalism degrees are really important. The broadcast degrees are important, but a lot of companies now are hiring for fit, right? They want to know that you have a passion for the work. They want to know that you'll be, a positive addition to the culture of whatever organization or media outlet you join. And they want to know that you're willing to grow and learn. And those things, Scott, are really, and that's true whether you're a 22-year-old coming out of school or you're a 50-year-old looking for a new opportunity. It's that passion and commitment to your community, to the work, it goes just as far, and your work ethic goes just as far as a piece of paper that you're submitting, with a list of the places you worked on it, right? I don't know. So that answers that question.
Yeah, I think so. And those are all excellent points. I think what it comes down to, I think, in a lot of ways is tenacity. Showing that you are interested in the job and that you will do, you will be tenacious in trying to get that job. I think for me, as someone who has in the past hired people right out of school, the biggest thing I look for, a couple of things really, and a lot of them are things that you touched on, Mark, that real expression of willingness and desire to get the job. If you are tenacious in pursuing the job, that tells me as a hiring person, tenacious when you're doing the job. So that's something that I look for. I also look for, when I'm looking at that resume and I'm looking at that cover letter, I'm thinking to myself, can this person write? Because that's, there was a time that I'm sure, Mark, you remember as well, and, where in radio, it didn't necessarily matter if you were, a quote unquote strong print writer, because you weren't writing for print, you were writing for on air. Those days, of course, are gone. Now, people who are coming into work in newsrooms and radio stations are also having to write for the web. So you are having to write for on air. You're also having to write what is essentially a print story. So one of the things I'm looking for is, can this person write? Can they construct a good paragraph? Can they, do they have a handle on what are kind of the rules of writing when it comes to grammar and so forth? But ultimately, what I'm really looking for, and this is, I think, in some ways something you can't teach. So it's not so much a question of whether or not you are experienced. What I'm looking for is critical thinkers, people who are going to, maybe they get a news release from their local MP, and maybe 4 out of 10 people who would get that release would essentially just write it up, and there you go. Here's some content. No, what I'm looking for is someone who's going to look at that release and immediately say, okay, I've got a lot of questions about this. And so I need to get in touch with this MP. I need to grill them about some of these things. I need to get some of the background information on this. So it's really about, for me, it's less about how much experience you have it's more about what I see your future possibly being, and what talents you have, what skills you have in being a journalist and being that kind of critical thinker who's not just going to, regurgitate press releases. I want people who are eager to dig up stories. And sometimes you might have two applicants for the same job. One of them's got 5 years of experience, but it's 5 years of just, just kind of regurgitating press releases. And this other person who's coming right out of school, but in their second year at school, they broke, a really important story. So what I'm looking for is, as someone who is, potentially hiring someone without much experience, is those kinds of critical thinking skills. So I hope that answers your question, Bianca. So what I would suggest is, if you are, when you do start your job search, be really careful about how you write your cover letter. Make sure that it's grammatically correct and all your punctuation's right, because that tells me, that you know how to write. And then in the interview process, certainly make me believe that you're a critical thinker, because then, you're going to really improve your chances of getting the job and probably have a better shot at having a good career. Jeremy, Amanda, either of you want to weigh in on Bianca's question before we go on to the next one?
I'll just quickly say, from a podcast and radio perspective, I think it's important to have made a podcast. And so I want to hear something, and that can just be a trailer or a sample of what you made. And same with radio. If you want to get into radio, I think having a demo, even if it's something you did at school or something that you did just on your own, I think having some work to show what you can do is really important. And also, if you've made a podcast episode that's like 1 hour long, do not expect your potential employer to listen to the whole thing. Segment out the best 2 minutes and send that as part of your demo. I think that's a good way to stand out from the crowd.
Mm-hmm. Jeremy, I've got a question that I think is certainly one that you can answer. And this one comes from Brittany from Fanshawe. Brittany wants to know, is traditional talk radio getting harder to get into modern day, so today? And what are the chances of someone new getting a gig, for example, at the CBC? But I think, Jeremy, you're probably pretty well positioned to answer the first part of that question. Is it getting harder to get gigs in talk radio today versus, say 10, 15, 20 years ago?
Well, to be honest, I couldn't speak to 10 or 15 years ago, but I'm that new. But I will say, I really don't think it's harder. It's just different. I'm sure everyone here could attest to the fact that you will hear, especially in school, you need to be prepared to go far and wide for your first gig, and that's true. That's very true. It's very common. My crew, the people that I was in Humber with, first jobs out of the gate, we've got people in Yellowknife, we've got people in northern British Columbia, and out east in the far corners there too. I think the opportunities that anyone that's listening to this now, the programs they're in, every school, I believe, has taken care to make sure that there's a versatility for students now, where years back there might have been a bit of a silo, if you will, maybe with a little bit of crossover, but now pretty much every school will teach you the multiple skills that are not just nice to have, but absolutely necessary out of the gate to be able to get that first gig. My case in point, again, my first gig at Global News Radio 640 Toronto, I was hired as a part-time board op, but I had the background and training from school to be able to say, oh, you need a weekend news anchor, I can do that too. And it's social media, the ability to say, sure, I'll handle your posts. Of course I can do that, because it's so now interconnected. As far as I'm concerned, anyone listening to this has an infinite amount of opportunities. They just need to be able to maybe not put so much of a concern as to that first opportunity, because this industry, more than most, the next opportunity is going to come lightning fast.
Interesting. You mentioned flexibility and skill set. How you went from being a board op and then into a weekend news anchor. You also do some producing for the talk shows during the week. That tells me that you do possess a very varied skill set. And I wonder if you could talk, and we'll get Amanda and Mark to weigh in on this as well, about the importance of having that multitude of skills. I mean, it's one thing to say, yes, I'm a really good newscaster, I can write really well for radio, but that's one element of the job. How crucial is it, to have that varied skill set in today's media market?
For my money, it's quintessential. There's one thing I would love to say, because I have this opportunity, I'm going to take it. No matter what discipline our listeners are studying right now, you would serve yourself well. If it's not part of your program, figure out some other way to get your hands on the knowledge. Production, study a little bit of production, even cursory. But in this day and age, especially if you have any interest in podcasts, you're going to want to know the production anyways. But it's one area that there is so much opportunity. Everyone needs good producers, and just to even be able to say, sure, I can take your audition software and make this work. Sure, I can take this Audacity and make that work. There's no end of different methods. Production is key for you to be able to say, let me at it. I got this. It's helpful. Does that help?
Oh, it looks like Scott may be frozen.
Oh.
We are winding down on time here with the next panel, just in the wings. Amy, is there any quick question, or did we get most of the questions answered? And then maybe we'll go around and just see if there's any quick final takeaway for anyone who's just trying to get their foot in the door and get that gig as a content producer or journalist.
Yeah, exactly. All of the questions that I have really been answered by you guys today, which is amazing. And yeah, my final question is going right from what Gina said, is really just those who are looking to get a gig. What advice would you guys have for those who are interested in the news, talk, and podcasting industry?
I can kick us off. And sorry, I have a restless dog here with me. So Simi is going to be part of this. All right. So bringing a cute dog to your interview might help. No, don't do that. What I was going to say is make some stuff, have gotten your hands dirty, and hopefully you have some things from school, but also on your own. But also listen to what the station you're applying for is doing. Listen to the competitors, like spend time listening, even if it's not the kind of stuff you want to make, knowing what the competitor is. And, we talked about some of these struggles with monetization and podcasting. And I know there was I was trying to answer as much as I could in the chat, but we're looking to you for ideas to help solve some of these problems and help define this new era of audio. You are the ones who are coming in and going to be able to breathe fresh life into some of the problems that we've had for so long, right? So the better you can understand the industry and that what's going on now, and having had a chance to get your hands dirty in it yourself, when you go into that interview, you can talk about and bring some ideas to the table, and just to show that you're thinking and that you know what they've already done, and maybe you listen to something else and you're thinking of putting the ideas together, that kind of thinking. Mark talked about the ability to be a critical thinker, like that's in a way a critical thinking about the industry. And so having people who are taking that approach to speaking about their work and the work that they hope to do will really help you stand out from the crowd.
Quickly for me, I just want to go back to quickly to a previous question about getting into talk radio and finding opportunities there. I can't speak for obviously the folks from the private broadcasters around the table here and the opportunities that in their workplaces. But I do know one tip for you, if you haven't caught on to it already, is if you're interested, and I know this from my CBC radio days, which the last time I was at CBC was in 2015, is that across the country in in the larger and smaller centers, there's a great need in most of the communities for what's called a casual. And a lot of people break into, for example, the CBC radio network they might live in St. John, New Brunswick, which is where I live. I happen to live. And so we have a CBC affiliate here. And there's always one or two people in those stations that are casual employees, but are getting like 30 and 40 hours of work a week. I've been that person before. So a piece of advice, but this could be true of different private broadcasters as well, not just a public one, is really looking for those creative entrepreneurial opportunities to get your foot in the door. And I know a lot of young people that I worked with over the years at CBC Radio, that was one of the ways they got in the door. And I'm sure that with the private broadcasters, there are similar opportunities. We have somebody in St. John who's still at St. Thomas University in Fredericton here that has worked with us throughout the winter as a casual, much like a CBC person. And I think the only other thing I would say is, I'm not sure if I'm using a really old expression here, but we, inside my workplace, we have a couple of Swiss Army knives. And what I mean by that, if that's an old expression, is that we have people that know how to do a lot of things, and they're willing and ready to do anything. Like they just contribute in so many different ways, from writing web stories to reading the news to going out and doing, news stories. And they're active on social media, so they have lots of strengths to bring to bear on how stories are shared in social media. And I know that didn't come up in this session, but I think it came up in the one before this one, that being an active sharer of your stories and knowing how important social media is to the process now of sharing media stories is really critical. And the younger employees know that better than the veteran ones. So yeah, just to Jeremy's point, being flexible, it doesn't mean that you'll be the Swiss Army knife. But if you're somebody who's really good on the air, and they also know that you're also a really good web writer, and you're also great on social media, and you can snap a quick video at a news conference, it doesn't mean that you'll always do all of those things, but having the confidence and ability to do all of those things, and if not being an expert at all of them, just be preparing to learn and work at it is so critically important. So I think that's what I would have to add.
Great, thanks. I think that's a good note to end on, and these sessions go way too fast, and the conversations will hopefully continue afterwards. So thank you so much to each of you. Thank you to Scott, who tried to push through those technical challenges. And we're going to move now into our sales promotions and marketing panel. Thanks, everyone. And our moderator for this panel is David McTeague, who is a promotions manager and a sponsorship development for Jazz FM. Welcome, David, and I'll have you introduce and get the rest of the panel rolling.
Sure. Everyone can hear me okay?
We can.
Right. Awesome. Well, first of all, I want to thank Loyalist College, of course, for sponsoring this panel today. I see there's about roughly 150 participants. You're going to want to stay on. Trust me, because marketing, promo, sales, I've done a few things at radio, and I know a lot of us have, and I think it's the best place to be. So on that note, I'm going to introduce some heavy hitters over here. If you can just say your name and the company that you are representing. So let's start with Cora.
Hello, my name's Cora Campbell, and I work for actually one of the last locally owned remaining multimedia companies in Canada. We're called Dougal Media, and we have 4 radio stations, 2 TV stations, a community newspaper, and now the largest local news source in our region, tvnewswatch.com.
All right, next up, Grace.
Hi, I'm Grace Howley, and I work with Zoomer Media. I am the VP of Sales, Assistant General Manager for the broadcast side. We represent 4 radio stations, 3 television stations, Zoomer Magazine, and several digital properties. And I oversee the sales aspect on an integrated, local, national, multi-platform campaign forum.
All right. Tracy, you're up next.
Hi, so Tracy Lamoureux from Vista Radio. I'm the GM and GSM for Ontario South. Vista has 44 stations across Canada, and currently we have 18 open positions, some of which are listed on the Career Day site and also at vistaradio.ca. So definitely come over and have a look, please.
Cool. And next up, we have Devin, who is our student ambassador. Devin, where do you go to school? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am attending the radio broadcasting course at Algonquin College. It is chef's kiss. It is awesome. I'm loving every bit of it, and I'm happy to be on this this little panel here.
Awesome. So for those who are just maybe unfamiliar, if you have questions, there's a little Q&A tab somewhere on your browser near the bottom of the Zoom. We'll do our best to get through to as many questions as we can. But what I want to do is I just want to kind of open the door and let our distinguished panel have their say on a few things. So we ended with Tracy, so I'm going to start with Tracy. Hey, Tracy, where did you start your career? And can you tell us a little bit of what that experience was like, trying to get your first shot in radio, and maybe a piece of advice that has stuck with you from then?
Okay, so I started in a small town, Smith Falls, at a small station, CJCS Radio. And I was really lucky actually to be in a small town because people had the time of day for me to have conversations so I could get my sales legs. And, it didn't take too long to realize that they were actually paying me to talk to businesses all day long, which I had a lot of fun doing. And the on-air team there was so good to me to teach me the business. And, it really did solidify, the fact that I was somewhere where I wanted to be and where I wanted to grow. The manager that I had at the time was getting ready to retire. So he had tremendous amount of experience to share with me, and he wanted to share it every single day, which was great. And something that he said to me was, work your day and don't let your day work you. And with all of the distractions that you get in a day, especially now with social media, email binging you, so many things going on, having control of your day and working that day helps you to get so much more done as opposed to letting that day take control of you. So it really laid a great foundation for me being in that small town. So don't be afraid to look up positions in small towns all over the country and get your feet wet and grow your career from there.
I 100% agree because I did a small town stint as well. So thank you for that. Grace, what was your journey like? That experience, the first job, and maybe a piece of advice that has stuck with you.
Well, I actually come from a small town myself. I'm from Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, from a little town called Brador. And so I ventured out here to pursue a career in entertainment. I had done my undergrad degree at Acadia in Nova Scotia and decided that I wanted to pursue entertainment. And I came out to Toronto and I went to Ryerson and took the radio and television program. From there, I remember the frustration being a student and constantly being told, you'll have to go to a small market if you want to get a sales job before you even venture the idea of trying to go for a big radio station. My advice is that you never let someone tell you that you can't do something. Be persistent, be tenacious, and just be positive, because I was determined. Not that I had anything against a small town, and I think there's tremendous value in having that experience. And I did in my summers off from school. I was a community events cruiser girl, and I learned a lot about the radio station environment during those summers. But when it came to my career upon finishing school, I was very persistent that I wanted to pursue a large radio station in Toronto. So I basically extended myself to people in the industry that I was very fortunate to have access to through Ryerson and introduced myself. I literally picked up the phone and went to see managers of stations in Toronto and introduced myself and told them of my goals to get into sales. And from 7 meetings, I had 6 reference emails go out from these station managers to other managers. If they weren't hiring themselves, they were wanting to help me. They just appreciated that I took the opportunity to reach out and to introduce myself. And the one thing that really stood out from one of the managers that told me in that process when I was trying to get a job was stand out. There's so much competition, but if you believe in yourself and you have a positive way of thinking and you're very tenacious, like that word keeps coming up, but it's true. You have to be tenacious about what you're pursuing. Then don't let anything stop you, but make yourself stand out differently from all the competition. We get so many resumes, hundreds of resumes. So what is going to be different about you? If you're going to be in sales, you got to be able to sell yourself. And I remember I picked 4 radio stations that I really wanted to work with. And I personalized my resume according to their station and who they target, what they were about, what type of music did they play. And I'll share the resume that I put together for the place I got my first job. And that was 102.1 The Edge, which is near and dear to my heart. And I certainly was not an edge girl. I like Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera at the time, but it just goes to show you don't have to love the music to be able to sell something and have fun and enjoy it. And I put my resume along with a passion letter of why I would be an amazing rep for their team. And I put it in a piñata. And if you know anything about 102.1 The Edge, they are indeed very edgy, and especially back in the day when I was applying around the year 2000. And in my passion letter, I put a cover on it. And in the cover was a picture of me as a community events cruiser girl pretending to pick my nose, standing beside the cruiser. And on it, it says, digging for a little edge, you found her in Grace Howley. And then it gave a passion letter about why I'd be good for their station. And of course, my resume. And then on the back page, it was a picture of me skydiving. Grace can be reached when she lands at. And then I put that letter inside of piñata. I dropped it off at reception and with a big whacker stick and a blindfold. And I said, this is for your sales manager, Chris Sizem. It's my resume. And I was told after that Chris brought it into the sales team and said, this is someone's resume. And he said, we're definitely bringing her in for an interview. And I have a good feeling that she'll probably get hired. And that was before they even met me. So definitely advice is to stand out, be creative, be different, really just be yourself. And don't be afraid to do it, because a career is a long time and you want to have fun doing what you want to do. And you might as well do it being yourself and not pretending to be anyone else. So that was my biggest advice.
Great advice. And I love the story as well. There's a lot of things that people can take from there for sure. Cora, I'm going to hop over to you.
I totally wish that I would have went before Grace, because there's no topping that one. I can tell you that. But I guess there is something to say with, people coming from small towns, because all 3 of us came from small town. Mine's probably the smallest. It was like 1,200 people. And actually the only reason why I came to Thunder Bay to go to school was because I was running my dad's bar and I was doing promotions and I was bartending and I was trying to do the books. And I figured, okay, Dad, if I'm actually gonna, be able to do all these taxes and payrolls and things like that, I have to go to school. So I enrolled in the accounting program here in Thunder Bay. And when you take that first year of business, you have to do a variety. You take accounting, you take marketing, there's a wide variety of different courses that you have to take. And it was very apparent very quickly that accounting was not the direction that I was supposed to go. So it just goes to show that you can go to school for one thing, but if you are open and you follow your path the way that it just naturally leads you, it could lead you in a completely different direction. And my professor said, you need to be in marketing. So I did. I transferred into marketing. And then I was fortunate enough to get my placement at Dougal Media. So I did it, and I shadowed the radio sales guys. It was so fantastic to just go around with to see how they sold and the relationships that they developed and how they were able to, create these creative campaigns and just how much they knew about all the different businesses in the city. You know, it's you're not just selling advertising, you're getting to know people's businesses. And I just absolutely fell in love with that. So my creative side definitely came through. My determination side definitely showed. By the end of my co-op placement, they hired me full time. So I've never actually written a resume or done an interview because I've been in the same company for 25 years. But that's not to say that I haven't done things throughout the company. You know, I started in sales and my motto basically was, I'm going to say yes to every opportunity that comes my way. And it's never going to be about how much money or you know, what title I get by doing these things. It was always about, is this an opportunity to help me learn something new? And then being with Dougal Media, I mean, we're TV, we're radio, we're print, there's just so much to learn. So I did that. So the first opportunity that came after radio sales was taking care of a mat leave for one of the television sales reps. So now I know radio and TV. And then we ended up developing a group sales team where we merged all of our separate media teams. And so then I had the opportunity to learn print. So now I know radio, print, and television. And then I was asked if I had any interest in doing promotions. So I'm like, yes, I will do that. Came back from my own maternity leave as promotions. And that was pretty exciting. I just absolutely loved being able to create, you know, really cool things that not only drove listenership to our radio stations, but, you know, could uniquely get our clients, our businesses involved. And there was such a high that came from watching that whole promotion play out. You know, that was just so good. And the cool thing about it is I had all the sales experience. So I had a whole other perspective of things that I had to offer. I could see what programming was looking for, but I also knew what sales needed in order for that promotion to get sold. So I spent 15 years doing that. And then the next opportunity that came my way within our company was that we needed to learn this digital stuff, is what I was told. Do you think you could go learn this digital stuff and figure out how we can make some money? So that was the birth of tvnewswatch.com. And so I did that. I learned it. I figured it out. I surrounded myself with people and different cities and networks and stuff in order to learn all of that. And we're now the #1 local online news source in the region. We're 20 times larger than anybody else in Thunder Bay. And I'm continuing to learn new things every day. You know, digital is an ever-changing medium. It never stays the same. All the stuff I learned last year doesn't even make sense anymore. So if it's for a person that really is open to learning new things. So there you go.
Hi, it's great. I think when they were asking about advice, you kind of took a little bit of my thunder there for that one. And the part just being that when you get your foot in the door, I would say it's never say no. You got to be a yes man, a yes woman.
Absolutely.
You know, like you just, because you might get called upon and you don't know if someone's stuck in a tight jam, a manager, and they need something and they can rely on you to do something. And that chances are they can rely on you to do something else. And the more responsibilities that you're able to take on, the more they'll see it. And people talk, of course, in the office, and we never know when an opportunity comes up and you can definitely get your chance to shine. And who knows, you might be able to walk into a position. So saying yes is very on your way up. Saying yes is cool. And then saying no, when you get a chance to start saying no, it's also very important as well. And I'm sure the team here will be able to agree with that for sure. I wanted to get over to Tracy. And Tracy, in your position, what are the goals that you're looking to accomplish where you're at the moment?
Okay, so at the moment, being a general manager and a general sales manager, there's so many pillars of goals. So obviously the biggest goal is revenue and EBITDA and all the fun stuff that comes with that, with budgets and expenditures and all of those great things you get to do when you become a manager. But then there's also the other part and the content part, and always working with that team to make sure that they are relevant and real, and talking about what's going on and how that connects with our news team and how that connects with our sales team. And then I'd have to say that 50% probably is just the people management alone, making sure everyone's okay, making sure everyone's time management is good, making sure that there's not too much on someone's plate. making sure that, like you said, David, people know how to say no, because so many people are clamoring at us to do the things, right? And I think since COVID, it taught us that we really have to stick to doing the things that we're really good at, and that's promotions and that's marketing for our own business and for our clients. So that, I think, of anything, we've learned a lot of lessons through all of this pandemic, and that's probably been the biggest one in my position. Is just learning how we sit back and take in and absorb what's going on and what we do about it, and how we move forward in news and content and sales. It's a lot, but it's always changing and it's never boring.
For sure, for sure. Grace, some goals that you have in the position you are. I know we all have unique, there's some crossover, but there's definitely challenges and goals and stuff. And I just like to have the students just kind of hear on this macro level, what you aim to accomplish.
Certainly things have changed a great deal over the last couple of years through a pandemic. I started out in radio sales at the Edge, and now I'm overseeing media sales for not just radio, but the other media that my company encompasses and oversees. So the biggest change in the last couple of years, the biggest challenge has actually been a great opportunity for us to become more valuable as marketing resources that our clients can count on. So 2 years ago, what was just a single media sales team is now a multimedia sales team. So we look after all our radio stations, Vision TV, One TV, Joy TV. We've got Zoomer Magazine. We have stations out in Collingwood and Coburg, and another magazine in Collingwood called On the Bay. We have several digital assets as well. So what we needed to do very quickly was be very agile as a team and willing to say, okay, being a one-trick pony doesn't work anymore. We need to become experts on all our media because our clients need us to be nimble. They need us to be resources offering more than just one stream of media. So now we have a team that has been trained in the last couple of years, and they know how to sell all the media. They know how to marry all the elements to make a more compelling campaign for our clients, which is garnering far more results than what they were with just the single radio campaigns. Radio is always first and foremost in my heart, but it's been a thrill to work with this team to really figure out best practices with other media that complement what we're doing on radio. So I definitely encourage you all to, if you have a passion for radio, that's wonderful, but to also learn about other media and how we can amplify what they're doing and vice versa, because that is a big part of what we're doing now and moving forward. And now we're looking at opportunities where we just last week acquired Blog Toronto. So this is another opportunity for us to bring into our tool of media assets to learn something new and to expand what we have available to our clients to promote their product or their service. So definitely agility is critical in reaching our goals. We lost a lot of revenue throughout the pandemic and initially, especially with radio, but we're gaining that back because we needed to look at different lines of revenue opportunities because we lost major ones like travel, like retail, arts and entertainment were shut down. And that was 70% of our revenue. And I have a $9 million budget on radio alone. So when you watch over half of your revenue go away in a month, you really start to sit down and reevaluate things. And I was really proud of how we really rallied and came together and learned these new mediums and found different lines of revenue to attract new advertisers to radio. So you've got to be creative. You've got to think outside the box. When we lost those major arteries of revenue, we needed to find new clients. So we looked to the big guys, big pockets, and went direct. We are not the top rated stations in the city. So we've got a great story to tell. And we knew that if we just had the opportunity to sit in front of the right people direct at a client, like a McDonald's or a pharmaceutical company on an agency level, they may say, you're not the top 10, you're not the top 5, we can't buy you. Okay, great. We go direct to the client. And many times, I'd say 65% of the time, we ended up doing campaigns on a 6-figure level with these clients who rejected us at the agency level, but took us on direct because they believed in the story that we had to tell. We had research to support our audience being attractive and an appropriate match for their target consumer. So thinking outside the box, being creative, being positive, being resilient, and just loving what you do just makes all the stresses and challenges along the way just part of the routine. If you keep a positive attitude and you just do something you'll love, you'll get through the tough times.
Sure, for sure. Hey, Cora, you're up next. With some goals and with your vast resume, you've done many, many things. So I just love to hear some of the goals that you have for yourself and also that you look for towards the company that you're helping to build.
Well, my latest endeavor has made me the publisher for our digital property. So that was the last mandate that I was given, is to now go, okay, we built TV News Watch, it's #1, we want to expand. So if we can go back to the beginning of where COVID got us all started, digital didn't skip a beat. Digital actually became extremely important. So when we looked at the media that was across just our Google Media family, the other medias were struggling. They had those big pillars of money that went away. But for us, we broke records. I think it had to do with the fact that our local businesses were looking for a way that they could still do business, and they were moving or being forced now to move online. And so what better way to do that is to advertise online. So, and just with the reach that we had, our revenue increased so much over that time period. But the story that I was able to go back to them with was, look, at COVID hit, we were sitting at 3.5 million page views every 30 days. That was already #1 in the region. COVID hit and we catapulted to 7.8 million pages read in 30 days. That's huge for a town like Thunder Bay, right? But what that told us is not necessarily about the numbers, because who cares about the numbers? But it told us that the people of Thunder Bay come to TV News Watch when they're scared and when they need to know what's happening and when they need to understand what they can do and they can't do. They turn to us, right? And so there's no better testimonial than that. So when we go to our businesses and say, hey, our community is turning to TV News Watch to get their news every single day, and you have the ability to put your message in front of their faces, that was such an easy sell. So we ended up being the fastest growing revenue source for our company during COVID. So we broke records as far as traffic, we broke sales records, and then we launched 2 brand new websites, SN News Watch to the east of us and NWO News Watch to the west of us, and just continuing on with that same model about being community focused and really focusing on trying to find out what our readers really want aside from just the breaking news, right? What are the human interest pieces, the investigative pieces, those kinds of things that we could fill that hole with, and that seems to be going very well.
Awesome. I do have some questions. Actually, I want to hop in and just say, Devin, did you have any questions or anything on your end so far? I'm actually going to post some stuff from the Q&A as well, but did you have anything?
Yeah, actually, I was really interested in what Grace was talking about, because so far, at least in my experience, in the first 2 years, marketing, sales, and promotions have been kind of like numbers focused, and I know that is an aspect of it, and like demographics and stuff like that. But I was interested in how you can be more creative in this kind of field.
I love this question, because one of the biggest things that I've learned working in this industry, having worked at Chorus, Astral, Bell, and now Zoomer, I had to experience radio and how they run radio departments at different companies. The one consistent thing prior to me coming to Zoomer Media was that it was very much Programming and sales was church and state. They did not talk. They did not work together. It was almost like very territorial. It was a territorial feel where each side was kind of worried you had to compromise too much to be successful. But when I came to Zoomer, and I never believed in that ever. I always believe in the greater good accomplished by teamwork, and you're only as strong as your weakest link. So when I came to Zoomer and met with the program directors there, and they were so open and wanting to be inclusive, I was like, great, I've met my people. And we've had tremendous success, you know, not being the top rated stations, we have outperformed the market according to where radio stations are performing against their ratings. We are outperforming our ratings by upwards of 15% prior to COVID, and now we're starting to come back, and we're currently at 6%. But we work with programming, and programming has to do everything to make sure that they're being integrous to their format. They're giving the listeners what they want to hear. And I am thoughtful to that process. So if I have a client who wants to talk about a leaky bladder, and my program director is like, on our beautiful classical music station, I don't think so, then we find creative ways in other programming, like on Zoomer Radio, for example, we have a program called The Tonic. And it's about all things that ail you. So we will find formats and features to fit those interviews that our client needs into the radio station format, as long as it doesn't compromise the programming of the station. So being creative is essential, but that communication between sales and programming is critical. When we sit down to make promotions for the station, for our, whether it's internal to promote the station or for our clients, we work hand in hand. And I've always been a creative person, and so has the programming side and production. We do all our meetings together. We ask each other respectfully, are we crossing any boundaries here? Are you good with this? Okay, how about, that's a great idea, let's change it that way. So again, teamwork, keeping an open mind, and being creative, very, very important.
Awesome. We have less than 5 minutes, so I'm just going to direct a specific question at each one of you ladies. I'm going to start with Tracy. And Tracy, I just wanted to know, what's the best part of your job or career? Like, what are you most proud of, and what keeps you motivated there to go in every day and do what you do?
I think that when you work with a sales team, I'll keep it focused on sales because that's the panel that we're on. When you work with the sales team, they have a lot of goals and a lot of different categories that they have to achieve in. And I think that when all of us, you know, bring our ideas forward together as a team, like you were talking about, Devin, being creative, we're very open to that. And we all sit together and no idea, you know, you just bring it all, nothing's too crazy. And we flesh it out and we put it together and we see where it might fit. And we even come up with, you know, what we call unique categories, and we celebrate those unique categories. Like, and we really work with our content teams to do that as well. So when they take all of that together and it's their work and they accomplish something and they sell that and they come back with that and they feel so good about it, that's the part of my job that I love the most, is when I see all of that work come together and it helps the client, it helps budgets, it brings revenue in the building, and it really makes that salesperson, you know, feel like they contributed from the beginning to the end of it. They saw it all the way through. To me, that is my huge sweet spot.
Awesome. Great answer. Love it. Cora, I'm going to bounce over to you and just ask you about pitfalls. Where have you seen others maybe lose focus, or some challenges that, you know, that you think people will come across, and how can maybe they can get through?
I think that probably the biggest thing that I've encountered is expectations. When people come in, they have a very set, you know, amount of expectations on what they want to do or where they want to go with it. And then I find that when it doesn't start off the way that they think it should start off, then they become very demotivated. They feel like, you know, I'm a journalist, or I got this degree and I should be starting at this level. They are not willing, well, the ones that, you know, end up in that pitfall are the ones that are not willing to start at the bottom or start somewhere else and then just working their way through. And I honestly feel that starting there teaches you way more, because you have such a diverse amount of experience now that you're bringing to the table when you do get to that position. So the saddest part for me is knowing that they come in with these set expectations, and then if it doesn't work out that way, and they're not promoted to manager in 6 weeks, and have 6 weeks vacation and things like that, I find that that's a learning process. And I find I hire a lot of co-op students. I pride myself in the fact that's how I got my start, and I think people need to get experience somewhere before they go to the next level. So I hire a lot of them because I feel like that's our, that's what we should be doing. And I always can feel, when they're starting to lose that motivation, and they think, oh, I'm going to go get another job because they think it's going to be better. And so many of them have called me after their second and their third job and said, okay, I'm sorry. Right. This was actually pretty darn good. The grass is not always greener on the other side. And so many of them have called me back to get the job. So yeah, that's probably the big one.
Awesome. And Grace, any parting advice that you would like to share with someone who's looking to break in? I know there's a couple of questions and stuff here, but we're gonna have to wrap up with this one. So just a parting piece of advice that you'd like to share.
It's a Maya Angelou quote that I've always loved, and that people will forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And it's so true. I pride myself on my East Coast roots. You can take the girl out of Cape Breton, you can't take Cape Breton out of the girl. And it's true. I love people. I love working with people, the best of them, even the most challenging. And it's just such a wonderful feeling to just help someone build their business, or just find the opportunity for them to build their career, because there's both sides of it. There's the sales side where I'm helping clients build their business along with an amazing team. And then there's the other opportunity, which I don't take lightly, in managing a group of people. And that's helping them reach their career goals and feeling happy and supported and encouraged in their workplace. So and the thing that keeps coming back is, people like to feel cared for. And that's the biggest compliment. If a client and an employee or colleague of mine says, it means so much to me that you just care and that you're here to help. And oftentimes too, I'll say, you know what, I don't think we're the right fit for you and your company, but let me refer you to another amazing radio station. Let me give you a contact. And when you put kindness out to the world, I really believe it comes back.
I believe so too, for sure. That quote's also really powerful. So yeah, kudos on that, sharing that as well. I know Gina's gonna hop on, but just before she does, I know there's some questions here in the Q&A. So I think we're gonna try and I guess we can just type some answers in apparently. So I just want to know that we're looking to answer your questions as well. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Have a great afternoon, and take it from here, Gina. Go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David, and to all of our panelists, and Devin for being there as well, representing students. The time, as I keep saying, we've run out of time, and thank you for sharing that. And that was such a great note to end on as well, Grace, about how, we're all in it together, and just to make it great and be kind to each other. Mm-hmm. Also, thank you to Loyalist College for sponsoring that panel, and to Evanov Communications, who is our title sponsor today. Still to come, we are going to be having a panel with announcers, producers, and creative, and also a TV news, sports, and operations panel. But at this point, we want to focus on the Michael Monty Scholarship Award before we take a bit of a break. The Ontario Association of Broadcasters is pleased to offer a cash award each year to honor the memory of Michael Monty. This goes to a student. He was a professor at Seneca College for more than 30 years and was well loved. He was volunteering on various broadcast related boards, including the OAB, and made a difference in the thousands of lives of students. This award is nominated and then judged by an independent committee for a student who has strong academics and finds ways to get back to the school and community. So on behalf of the OAB Board of Directors, it's my distinct pleasure to announce that this year's winner, and you might have a clue on your screen right now, is Kate Otterbein of Fanshawe College. Congratulations, Kate.
Hi, thank you.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. This is crazy. I'm shaking. I just wanted to say a big thank you to OAB and everybody who's helped me get here. My professors, my family, all my classmates. Like, it's been such a whirlwind and such a roller coaster, and it's crazy to think like we're graduating this year. But yes, just thank you to everybody who's helped me, and especially to OAB for this award.
Thanks, Kate. I'll just give a tiny bit of background. Kate is studying broadcast journalism. Her nomination spoke to her work ethic, involvement in campus media, and positive attitude. Says yes to all of the extras, is a volunteer student rep on the campus station's board of directors, and is a mentor to many students. In addition to those responsibilities, she works also with Fanshawe student newspaper, the Interrobang, when she's not out in the community covering stories for her programming. And the editor of the paper wrote in a letter of support that Kate believes journalism is a public service and an act of community involvement, that she recently broke a story about an off-campus student residence and its various security flaws. It was deeply informative, showed how student journalism can be used as a tool to promote change and uplift the voices of community members. So congratulations, Kate, our 2022 recipient of the Michael Motti Scholarship Award.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. All right, we will be taking a tiny bit of a break. I'm going to pull up our Menti question and move on to a different one as well. And we want to be back by 3:25 for this. So I'm just going to see where we're at on this question. And you can go to this board now to get to our next question. Oh my goodness, there we go. What would you like to say about the day? You're welcome to just put anything that you've heard, a piece of advice, what you're thinking of things so far, what you're looking forward to, any of that type of thing. Feel free to post that on here, and we'll return back at 3:25 to get underway with our next panel. And thank you so much for being here and all of our participants.
New, waybacks, all kinds of music, all the hits. Z1035. My girl come flip it like a flippergram, flip it like a flippergram. Make your bumper flip like a flippergram, flip it like a flippergram, flip it like a flippergram. Your left y'all wind up on my body, y'all. Why like it's a carnival? Y'all me love the way you wine for me. Y'all the wine is so emotional, so wind up on my body, y'all. Be why you want wine, your waistline for me. Baby, you're bubbling, 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 baby. Girl, you a party animal. Girl, you active, no, you no lazy. Girl, you a party animal. Oh, you wine, you drive me crazy. Girl, you a party animal. que no vale un centavo. Pobre diabla, llora por un pobre diablo. ¡Ey, ey! ¡Qué palo bachateo! Pobre diabla, se dice que se te ha visto por la calle vagando, llorando por un hombre que no vale un centavo. Pobre diabla, llora por un pobre diablo. ¡Ey, ey! Que no te valorizo nunca y que nunca lo hará, que solo te hizo llorar, pero tú lo amas. Que no te valorizo cuando con eso te hechizo, que solo te utilizo y hasta te embarazo. Pobre diabla, se dice que se te ha visto por la calle vagando, llorando por un hombre que no vale un centavo. Pobre diabla, llora por un pobre diablo. Se te ve llorar, llorar, solo llorar, llorar, ya no bailas más. Llorar, todo es llorar, llorar. Pobre diabla, se dice que se te ha visto por la calle vagando, llorando por un hombre que no vale un centavo. Pobre diabla, llora por mí, que soy tu pobre diablo. Pobre diabla, llora por mí, que soy tu pobre diablo. Pobre diabla, llora por mí, soy tu pobre diablo. Tú sabes. Pobre diabla.
103.5. All the hits.
Personally, 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 I rock your body. I promise you go home, you won't tell daddy. I give it to you like you never had it. Screaming church, like speaking Chinese. Now waiting me this, back a boom boom. Now waiting I see Saga, but she know one be. She talks so she know one live. I know go lie, the things within my mind. When I see you dancing, girl, you got me high. And if you wanna try, make it go day tonight. Cause I'm in the mood, as long as you're feeling the groove, I deal with you. Personally, 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 I go deal with you. Personally, personally, I go deal with you. 1, 2, 3, pick it up there.
All right, so when the music stops, it's like Simon says, we all need to freeze or sit down or something. Welcome back. You are at OAB Career Day. I hope everyone was able to get a quick snack or stretch in between our panels. You'll also see in the chat that the OAB Career Board has been shared with you. So that's something you'll be able to reference a little bit later. Also, I want to mention that we will have a questionnaire sent to you probably tomorrow about today, because we do want your feedback on how to make it much better. And thank you for having your say on our Menti board through that break on some of the things that you've also taken away. Our next panel is announcers, producers, and creative. And our moderator is Paul Thomas with MZ Radio. And Paul is the PD and assistant GM of the New Classical FM and Zoomer Radio in Toronto. And he's also an OAB Board of Director member and on the organizing committee for this event. So thank you so much, Paul, for being here. And I'll let you take it away and introduce the rest of the panel.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gina. Delighted to be here today. This is always a lot of fun. We're going to have a great time as we dive into the on-air production and creative side of radio, which I know is something that a lot of people get excited about. So let's get right to it. With me today, I have Ryan Darensing, who is the Digital Content Administrator for Evanov Communications. We have Pooja Handa, who is the new morning show host at CHFI here in Toronto. And we have Ian Selecki, who is the Director of Operations at Bayshore Broadcasting. And we do have a student ambassador with us, and that is Roshan from Humber College. So welcome to all of you, and let's see you all up on screen if we can. All right, well, let's kick it off just with a bit of a chat about, you know, we don't need to hear everyone's stories because we all have different paths that we've taken, and I think some of that will come out organically. But I want to start with just chatting a little bit about what the most important things are for people when they get their foot in the door. I know today has been a lot about getting that first gig, but when you want to be on air or you want to be in production or in some of these departments, we need to think about the path that brings us there. Sometimes, you know, these are roles that don't happen right away. You're not necessarily going to get your first gig walking into a radio station being on air. So I want to talk a little bit about the period that needs to happen between getting your foot in the door and then how to get yourself, you know, recognized as someone with potential to go on air and develop that announcer career. And perhaps maybe the first person we should talk to for that is Ian. As Ian, you manage a lot of stations in a variety of markets across Ontario where you do help develop young talent.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, and hi, everybody. It's great to be here today. We're in smaller markets, so oftentimes people will sort of treat the smaller markets, smaller stations as that springboard to get their career started, right? You might find that's a door that's a little bit easier to get into sometimes. And then from there, maybe move on to a larger market. And we understand that is a path that people take and they come through our stations to do that sometimes. The thing that I think we're looking for anybody who's coming into a role like that and that you want to be looking to do when you come into a building that way is do everything. Be available for everything. Troy in his video, I think that you guys watched earlier, I saw it the other day, is really on point about this when he says you just need to go and actually volunteer for things. You know, put your hand up, say I'll do it. You don't know how to do it? That's okay. Figure it out. You know, like go and try different things and understand that the path to the job that you want may not be the most direct path there. So if you want to be on air, you want to be a morning show host in Toronto, you want to be Pooja's next co-host, then you know you can get there, but you may have to dabble in creative and production first. You may have to dabble in, you know, digital production. You may have to do some voice tracking on a country station, you know, whatever it is. You may have to try some things that you might not have thought would be the straight, linear, narrow path to where it is you want to go. And we try to give people an opportunity to do that, whatever their strengths and interests are. And that the more things that you can do, the more open you are to different opportunities, the more likely it is that you're going to take a step forward, even if it's not quite the right direction that you want to go in. Eventually, it may come back to where you want to be.
Absolutely. I think there's something to be said about just the notion of saying yes to everything, and then, opportunity presents itself. And that's something we deal with all the time with our, new employees or interns, is just sort of saying, hang in there, because you never know what's around the corner. You never know who's about to say, hey guys, I'm out the door. And all of a sudden there's a slot to fill or something that needs done. Pooja, let's flip over to you, because you're obviously enjoying a lot of excitement right now as you've launched one of the biggest morning shows here in Toronto, and you've had a very illustrious on-air career. But take us back to the beginning in your case. Let's hear a bit of that story and what it was like for you when you were coming out of school and you were navigating this industry and trying to figure out how to launch your on-air career.
Well, I was very lucky. I went to Seneca College, and we got to hear from a lot of different experts in the field, and people who would just come back to visit and give advice. And one of the things they had said, and I followed this, and I'm so glad I did, which was, when you were a student, people will open the door to you. They will take your calls, they'll give you advice. As soon as you graduate, that's when you're looking for a job, and chances are they probably don't have a job for you. So the job that you should be doing right now as a student is already getting your foot in the door, making those connections, placing those phone calls, those internships, building those relationships. So I think I did a lot of that, which really did help. So by the time I got to my first job, which was behind the scenes as an editorial assistant at Global News, and I was not doing anything fancy. I was, getting coffee supplies. I was answering phones. I would do whatever job I could behind the scenes. I rolled the teleprompter. I printed off scripts, whatever it was, to sort of learn how the newsroom worked, be a sponge. And while all of that was happening in the background, I was also practicing and honing my own skills for the job I wanted, which was to be on air. And so, sometimes you hear dress for the job you want, not the job you have. It's sort of the same thing, where I was doing all those things behind the scenes and building relationships and getting that mentorship from people who knew what they were doing. They were experts, and they've had these veteran careers, but what I was doing was practicing at home, and that was in front of the mirror, or it was putting together my demo tape and having someone look at it and give me feedback, but then not just doing it because I wanted them to give me a job, but because I wanted to get better. So then I would, take their advice, go back, reshoot it, and then show it to them again. So I do think there is something to be said about, don't just talk about it, show them. And you have so many platforms that are available to you now that we never had, where you can show people, you can hone those skills, even if you don't have that job, so that when that opportunity does come up, you're ready and you can show them something. You'll be able to say, I can do this job here. Look, I've been practicing. This is what's been going on. Every job I've had has been, except for this one that I have now. But before all of this, all of the jobs I've had have all been because somebody left, because I filled in, because I begged and pleaded to be the fill-in, not because somebody chose me. So I think that's also really important, that sometimes you won't be the first choice, but it's only because I could show them that I could do it, that they had enough confidence in me to even let me fill in.
Absolutely. It's interesting too, when you talk about just, being there and absorbing everything. That's certainly something I remember strongly. And I started back when it was Easy Rock, long before it was Boom. But the announcer that I sat in the room with every day is still there. His name's KJ. And I remember I learned so much just from watching him every day open the microphone and do his thing, and just seeing that slight shift between, the guy that was in the room chatting away with me and, telling me his story ideas or about his week, and then hitting that button, going on air and doing his thing. And I can't stress everyone watching enough, when you get your foot in the door somewhere, you're going to experience that as well. And it's very important to just sort of sit back and watch and listen, because I guarantee you, and I mean, I went to Seneca as well. My education was fantastic, but nothing compares to that first year or two in the industry in terms of how much you will learn and how quickly you will learn how things are done. Ryan, let's flip over to you, because you were telling me the other day that you wanted to be an on-air announcer, and this is a very common thing in the industry. I wanted to be an on-air announcer as well, but you, like me, sort of found a different path when you started in this industry, and now you're doing something different, but something you absolutely love. And I think that's an important part of this conversation as well, because clearly you were open to what the world was going to throw your way.
Yeah, like everything that Ian, Pooja, and Paul has said regarding getting your foot in the door and learning and being that person that people can approach and go to, and being that kind of go-to person is right on the ball with what I think every employer kind of expects from new employees or people that they're looking to join the team. Me, I was 15, 16 years old looking to be an on-air announcer in the biggest market in Canada. And now that I think about it, that's kind of wild to want that. But because of a random email one day to the president of the company, I got my foot in the door as a board operator. And from being a board operator, I was able to use my skills that I had on the graphic sense to start using to make video productions or graphics. And one thing led to another, and they really didn't have anybody at the time who was doing that kind of thing on their platform. So like Z was the first radio station in the GTA to be on Facebook, and that's because I had just joined Facebook, and this is like way back now, because now everybody's looking at getting rid of Facebook. But from that experience alone, I was able to grow my skills within the company. They gave me opportunities that I didn't think imaginable. Like the first video production that I actually did was for a concert we held for 17,000 people at Wonderland Summer Rush. So hearing the audience scream over something I made is what clicked in my head. It was like, I don't want to be an announcer anymore. I want to do this forever. I want to do like stage production and stuff. And slowly that got me involved with working with like Universal Music and MLSE and a whole bunch of different Spotify, Apple Music that outsourced me to work on marketing campaigns for them while I still run all this stuff here at Evanoff. So opening those doors, talking to the right people, and just taking a chance, like it really helps. I know people think that when you lay back and do things through the proper procedure, you might get recognized, but people who email me directly, who have done research on who I am or who they'd be reporting to within that company and contact them directly, it's a huge leg up on the competition.
That last point is very true too. I just want to make the point that I think it's so crucial if you're applying to a job at a radio station that you've done your research, that you're showing the people at the station why you want to work on this at the station. There's nothing that turns me off more than seeing a cover letter that's like, I'm just looking to further my career as a radio announcer or as a broadcaster to gain more experience. It's like, okay, that's great. You could do that anywhere. Tell me why you want to work with us. I think that goes a long way these days. I also want to say, there's something to be said, exactly what you were just talking about, Ryan, being in production or being behind the scenes. People don't realize how close we get to work with, the announcers and the on-air talent on a day-to-day basis. And in fact, sometimes, it's the producers and the writers and everything that are actually creating a lot more of the content that are going on air than the announcer might end up being responsible for. You really do get your hand in a lot of those things, and you still get to get your creative voice out there. It's certainly a very rewarding part of the industry to be in. Let's just talk about, so we've just gone through the notion of, okay, you really have to show people you want it. You really have to show people why they should believe in you, why they should take a chance on you. But, Ian, is there such a thing as too much? I've seen people get burned by being just a bit too eager or a bit too, arrogant with, I'm the next great thing in this industry. Have you experienced that at all?
Yeah, I think there's a limit. You can go too far. You basically, and what everybody else has said, what Ryan and Pooja have already said, is that you want to be top of mind for the person who's going to give you your next job. Here's a secret. Radio program directors, we're lazy. We've got so much going on. I don't have time to go out and search through stacks of resumes every single time I have a position open. I'm going to take the easiest but also best possible solution. And usually that's the person I already know. So either it's the person who already is working for me, maybe in a part-time capacity or at another station or something like that. And I say, yes, bam, that's the guy that I want. Or it's somebody who has reached out to me before. We've had a conversation. I'm sort of aware of where they're at in their career and their goals and what they're trying to do. And I think, you know what? Yeah, I think she might be the person for this job. So you do want to talk to people. You do want to be present in their minds, but you don't want to be hounding them. And I think the thing in particular you don't want to do, and you got to be really careful of this, is if you've gone to somebody and you've said, hey, can you give me any advice, any feedback on how to improve my, my demo or my resume or my application or whatever, and then they give you that advice, and you don't do that, and you just keep hounding them with the same thing and don't demonstrate that you're continuing to grow and you're continuing to work on your craft over time, then that is going to be a big X on my list, honestly, because I'm looking for somebody who's, even if you don't have the job, is constantly trying to learn more of those skills and get better and practice at things. So I don't mind somebody coming back to me time after time looking for more advice and more feedback, but I do want to see that you're taking that advice and feedback and actually executing it, because if you don't, then how do I know you're going to do that for me when you work for me, right? Like, that's what I want anybody who works for me to be able to do as well. So you can go over the top, but I think if you demonstrate that you're continuing to grow and improve and take that feedback and direction, then keeping in regular contact is not a bad thing.
Right. Now, Pooja, let's talk for a second about what being a radio announcer in this era means, because at one point it was like, okay, you just have to talk into a mic and have killer content, but now it's more of a full service job, right? You're looking at social media, you're looking at being able to generate your own video content. Tell us a bit about your experience and what you think is required of a modern radio announcer.
I love that the person who's been on the job for 1 month is the one who's going to give advice on this. For me, it's almost 20 years in television news, and I've just made the leap over to radio. So I am still very much learning. But what I have learned is that phrase, "you have a face for radio," is one, offensive. So don't say it. Two, it's not true. It's not true, because no longer, gone are the days where that's all you do. Nobody does one thing anymore. So yes, it's everything. The job is everything. It's multi-platform. So yes, you're on air for your show. And yes, you even produce your own content, even as on-air people, especially if your name is on the show, like the Pooja and Gurdeep show. You want to make sure that you are responsible for the content as well. Then there's all the digital stuff, and they do expect you to be doing things behind the scenes, constantly feeding the machine of social media, and really sort of taking all of that content that you spend all this time on in the show and then being able to use that on other platforms. So again, multi-platform is something that you're going to hear everywhere you go. You have to be prepared to do everything. The more versatile you are, the better. So I'm finding my on-air TV experience is certainly helping. Are they exactly the same? Absolutely not. The economy of words and really painting a picture, those are the things in radio that I'm still learning how to do and trying to hone as well. But you certainly do realize that there are a lot of skills at play all the time. And I think one of the other skills that I should also put in there, and it goes to your last question as well, is authenticity. Because I think people can spot a fake a mile away, right? And whether you're watching them or listening to them. And so as long as while you're doing all those things, you're being you and authentic about it, I think that will always sort of set you up for success, where people will be rooting for you and they'll see that, you are somebody who is trying to learn and trying to grow. And, you might not be good at all those things in multi-platform. You might only be good at one thing and okay at the others, but you will get better just by doing it, just by practicing it.
Absolutely. I want to just quickly flip over to some of the questions we're getting here. We have a good one from Scott that I'm going to take a stab at answering first, and then I'm going to get all of you guys to chip in here. He says, how do you get over hearing your own voice, especially if you don't have the usual boomy bass-filled voice that a lot of successful announcers have? Do you have any tips to make your voice sound more radio-like? My answer to that question is don't. Don't try and make yourself sound like you're trying to be on the radio. try and make yourself sound like the best competent and comfortable person and version of yourself. I think everyone's going to agree with that, but if anyone disagrees, feel free to chime in.
I don't know what you're talking about, Paul. We're talking on the radio, and that's
Yeah.
how you should sound.
Exactly.
No, like
Exactly.
nobody. The people who do still sound like that are I would politely say relics of an older style of radio that is not really being done in a lot of places anymore. I don't think that you don't need to be the big giant voice anymore. What is more important is what you're saying and how personable you are when you say it. If you come off as a real genuine human being, it doesn't matter what your voice sounds like. There's some really great examples of people all across the country who have, what you might call different sounding voices compared to the traditional old radio dude, but they're absolutely killing it with their content.
Absolutely. I always tell people, who ask this question, who are nervous, I say there's nothing people like less than hearing someone not confident in what they're saying. And the easiest way to win someone over is to just clearly show that you're knowledgeable in what you're talking about. I don't want to ignore our student ambassador, so I'm going to throw it over to Roshan. We've talked a lot about, okay, you're getting in the industry, you're getting this first, year under your belt at a station. And we're talking about all the things you should be doing in that year. What's your take on what we're saying? Is this helpful? And do you have anything you want to ask us at this point?
Yeah, it's extremely helpful. I do have a couple questions myself, but first I just wanted to say thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for all the panelists for volunteering your time to help future industry professionals. But to stay on theme of what you were just talking about, I guess one of the questions I'm going to ask is, what would be the best piece of advice that you got while you were in the industry?
Who wants to go? Someone jump in here.
I'll go. I think, people tell you all the time that the industry is small and, don't burn any bridges. And they say this and you're like, okay, well, how small is it? It's small.
It's small.
It's amazing how many people I know, and I'm just because I've been in, the business for so long, over 20 years, almost 20 years, that so many people. And when I was up for this job that I have now, one of the things that kept coming back was, well, we talked to so-and-so and we talked to so-and-so, and everybody said the same thing, which is, you got a great attitude, you work hard, you're somebody who shows up and, you have a good attitude, that kind of thing. And, you'd be surprised that over all these years that still matters. What you did, what's on the resume, all of that stuff. If nobody wants to work with right? Like if you're a bleep hole, nobody's going to hire you. So it's very important to maintain those relationships, and they have to be real. They have to be real relationships because people can, once again, spot a fake.
It is indeed like a very small industry. I mean, we can't stress that enough, and people do know everyone. And I think more than ever, I mean, as you were, Ian, a couple minutes ago using the word relics, I think the person who has all the talent and thinks they can behave however they want because of that is one of the real relics of this industry. And I think they're finding themselves less and less employed. Does anyone else want to chip in, Ryan, with some great advice that you've received?
If anybody here is knocking right now, I'm right below the Proud FM studio, and the guy has a habit of shaking his knee while he is on air. So I hear it in my office all the time. Drives me nuts. But for me, there was an announcer that I met here way back in the day, almost 15 years ago, and his name's Richard Carell. He's a big voice guy. He's on for Fox and stuff like that. And he's kind of the person that helped me explore the video side by hooking me up with Fox to do video production for them. One thing that he said to me is, one day you'll find a boss that you believe in their vision. And once you find that, don't let go. 15 years ago, I met Paul, I met Matt, and between the two of them, I think regardless if I'm in a role here or not, they're always going to be part of my career. And I really value their opinion. Anything that I work on, I want to get their exposure on it. And it's hard to find somebody that you could trust who's in an upper management role like that. Someone who's going to help guide you rather than just tell you what to do. So that would be my piece of advice. If you find someone who you believe in and they believe in you, don't let go of them.
Right. Absolutely. Ian, anything you want to chime in here?
Yeah, one thing quickly about what Pooja said is that that is exactly how it goes when you're thinking about hiring somebody. Is you don't even look at the references they provide. You think, who do I know has worked where they work? And then you go call that person and you ask them, and that's just what happens. So who you know matters. One piece of advice that I was given by somebody who still works for me today, and he's a very, very wise program director, and he's always said this, and I keep it dear to my heart. Nobody ever turns on the radio to have a bad time. People are coming to you to be entertained. They're coming to you to lift their spirits. They're coming to you to laugh, to smile, to have a good day. So first of all, if you're feeling down, you got to get over that. You got to go deal with that on your own. But on the air, you got to be up. You have to be entertaining, because that's what the radio station is doing. And two, when you're picking the things that you're going to be talking about, don't get me wrong, I get it. It's been a rough couple of years. It's not a super happy world out there right now. But you need to come at that content with a sense of optimism, with a certain brightness to it. Because if you don't, people are just going to get depressed listening to you on the air, and they're going to tune out. They're not going to have any connection to what it is that you're talking about. So I know that's a bit off from where we were before, but as far as content goes, I hear that all the time. People want to address some of the more challenging things that are going on in the world. And I'm not saying that you can't do that, but you just have to do it in such a way that that is not a downer, because people don't need to be any more down than they already are. It's rough enough without having to turn on the radio and being reminded of it. So so nobody turns on the radio to have a bad time.
Right. Absolutely. I'm just going to chime in quickly with my own advice, because it was very helpful for me when I was young in my career. And it's a little different than a lot of what we heard. And that is, I took a gig in Montreal after working in Toronto for about 3 years. I was a board operator here, went to Montreal, I'll keep this very quick, and it wasn't working out. I wasn't happy there. I was trying to manage a long-term relationship back in Toronto. All I wanted to do was be back here. And my old program director that put me up for the gig came out, and he was visiting. It was the same company. And he said, "What's going on? I'm hearing all this stuff." And he told me a story about it. He's like, "Listen, I took a gig at the start of my career and it wasn't for me. And I just told them, this isn't for me. It's not working out. I'm so sorry." But he's like, "It's just a gig, at the end of the day." And so I do want to just throw that in, because as we're talking about the importance of all the things you do in your first year or getting that opportunity, don't put yourself in a position where your mental health, your happiness or whatever is at jeopardy. You can always change it. It's just a job. It shouldn't be the thing that controls every aspect of your life. But let's go back to some of the more exciting radio stuff. Ian, I'm going to stick with you for a second. When you're working with younger talent, what are some of the common mistakes that you see, or some of the things that you're just like, boy, everyone that comes out of school really needs to work on this?
Probably the first thing that jumps to mind is recognizing that your audience is probably not your age. In most cases, most stations, some formats are an exception, depending on where you go. Like some stations, really hot station like Z, for example, has a lot of younger listeners, but also a lot of older listeners. And generally speaking, I know I'm generalizing here, but most people coming out of the college program are in their early 20s. And most of your audiences that you're probably going to be speaking to on most of the stations that you're applying to are likely in their mid 40s. That's kind of the sweet spot for a lot of these radio stations in terms of core advertising demos. In some stations, it's even older than that. Some stations, again, are younger, but you got to recognize that the audience may not necessarily share your particular passions or interests. I think it's important for you to be interested in the kind of things that you're talking about on the air, because that does come out in the power and excitement of what you're saying. But you have to recognize who your audience is first and foremost. So when I get demos that are really rich in content about the latest video game or TikTok star or something like that, I can tell that it's something you're passionate about, but it's not necessarily something that anybody in their mid 40s is going to be really passionate about as well. And at the end of the day, you've got your passions, and that's great, but we've got an audience that we need to serve, and they need to be interested in what you have to say. So so that's thing number one, is really consider your content and which audience you're trying to speak to, particularly even when you're applying for a job. I mean, back to Paul's point earlier, don't just come to me and say, I want a job because I want a job. Do a little bit of research into the station that you're applying to. Who do you think their audience is? And then tailor your demo content to match that audience, rather than just giving me whatever you did on the college radio station, which might have been fine for the college radio station. It's probably not fine for my classic hit station.
Mm-hmm. Pooja, let's take the content thing over to you for a second, because as you mentioned, you're newer into radio after years of TV. So what's it been like for you? I'm sure you've been in tons of strategy meetings, planning meetings over the past 8 months, 10 months, however long it's been, thinking about what type of content you're going to bring to this new morning show. So, I mean, can you talk to us about some of that and how you approach each show and what type of content you're looking to bring to the airwaves every day?
Paul, you want state secrets, huh? You want to know what we're doing? No, I'm just kidding.
Bit.
I'm totally kidding. No, it is probably the most difficult part of the job, because I'm on for 4 hours every day and trying to come up with content that fills that entire time. Of course, there's music in between. Is tough, because you want to come up with something original. You want to find a unique way of talking about something that's authentic to you, but at the same time, relatable. And I think like the best way of going about it, for me at least, is that, your audience is everything. At the end of the day, it is a absolute privilege to be able to sit in a chair in front of a microphone and do that for a living. And, a lot of people have jobs that they go to every day that they hate. I don't have one of those jobs, and, worked really hard to get there, but it is a privilege. So sitting in that chair and knowing that people are giving you their time, sometimes, they're driving, they're preoccupied, there's other things going on, but that time is precious. So you don't want to waste their time. That's one. But two, I think you also want to be really reflective of what's happening. So, as Ian mentioned, yes, we're, going through 2 years in this pandemic, and it hasn't been easy for people, but they're also tuning in so that they can, get away from that, listen to some good music and feel good, as Ian mentioned. So how do you not be tone deaf to what's going on, but then also give them what they need? And so I think as long as you're sort of always taking that approach of, like, from a very real perspective of, people have bills to pay, people have lost their jobs, it's harder to do things. Mental health is a big issue. So I think as long as you sort of look at all your content with that in mind, there's a way to sort of bring it back. So, you could say something like, hey, look, we've all had a really hard time. This has been challenging for people in many different ways. So why not just laugh? Let's laugh about something. How about this? And then, you get to that, whatever that story is. So I think there is a way to come up with content that is fun and exciting. You got to make it unique. You've got to have your take on it, because guess what? Whatever the news of the day is, whatever that content of the day is, every radio station is talking about it. So how do you make it your own? And again, reflective of what people are going through, because the last thing they want to do is turn on the radio and go, that person doesn't represent me.
Right, absolutely. Ryan, when it comes to your content, I mean, you're surrounded there by Z103 signs, but Evanov, as we know, has a variety of different stations that are very different in terms of, who they target, very different age demos and very different lifestyles. So what's this been like for you as you, wrap your head around, digital content for so many different target audiences?
Oh, it's hectic. Like we're going from country to light format to a top 40 dance station. And then we have multicultural stations. We have a 90s station. So you're slightly ripping your hair out trying to figure out what to populate on all these different stations. And thankfully, we have an individual in each cluster that is responsible for that content. But as much as announcers are responsible for getting their own content, from a digital perspective, we understand that whatever they're talking about is probably going to be broadcasted on our competitors as well. So what can we do as a digital platform to create content that they don't have? So we'll do things like, these are the top 10 songs from the Veld artist that's going to perform this week. While every other radio station will be talking about how Veld's announced and who's in the lineup, we'll take one of them, focus on that, create a playlist out of it, create an online blog post with these different songs, link it to the videos, and to give things on air life after on a digital platform. Because when it's on air, you're going to talk about it once, maybe you'll revisit it a couple times within that hour, and then it's gone. So how can we take that piece that was talked about and elaborate on a platform that gets everybody involved?
Big time. Yeah. I mean, that's certainly one of the biggest things is when our morning team does such a great piece of content, you think, okay, do we want that just to be 2 minutes on air? Or do we want it to live on forever and figure out a way to do so? We're going to have to wrap up soon, but I want to go back to Roshan and just make sure you get another question in here as we're, going through all of this. I mean, we've really talked about, okay, it's your first year in the industry. You got to listen, you got to learn. We've talked about what type of content you might be thinking about. So I think some very good points from Ian as to, don't come in thinking I'm going to talk about my favorite video game if that's not the station I want to be on. What do you make of all this? And do you have anything that's sticking out as something we've missed or something that, you're dying to know or that you feel could be really helpful to you and your peers?
I mean, obviously everything that you guys said and the other panels all the advice is extremely helpful. I think it's just hard for us to put ourselves out there and that kind of thing. But one final question I feel like would be good to wrap up on. Knowing what you know now, what would you do differently entering the industry, if anything?
That's a great question. And I'm going to just throw it right to the panelists, whoever wants to jump in here.
I think that for me, I always thought, well, if I work really hard and I show people what I'm capable of, that eventually, they'll see how much I'm working hard at this, that I will be the person that they want to give this job to. And I realized that, I actually work with a lot of talented people. So at the end of the day, it is very competitive. And how do you sort of stand out? And when everybody's good, what does that look like? So I feel like if I knew what I know now and I applied it back then, it's so important to get on people's radar. And I think I've always waited for the job to come up to show my interest and to, talk about why I would be good for the job. But I think now knowing that so much of the time when there is a new position, those conversations are already happening way before the post even goes out. So
absolutely,
how do you become a part of the conversation before the job is up? And because I've never been part of the conversation, I've always been like, oh, please, can I fill in? Or I promise you I can just give me a try and I'll show you. I feel like if I had known to get in those conversations early, like taking the initiative of going into my boss's office and saying, look, I know you don't have anything right now, but down the road, these are the things that I'd like to do, or, please consider me for this, that, or the other, or, before you make a decision, I hope that I could at least get an interview or, even a conversation about it kind of thing. And, I did that later on in my career and it really helped. But to begin with, I was too scared to have those conversations. And I took it personally. Like I thought maybe I wasn't good enough and that maybe I just needed to work harder or be better. And sometimes that is the case, but sometimes it has nothing to do with your talent.
Absolutely.
And add on to that, correct, 100% what Pooja said. But it's also important to understand that you are your own brand. If you're working with a company that you're going to be in production with their brand and creating elements for their brand, but you yourself are your own brand within the company and to other potential employers, and really focus on what you want to accomplish with your brand. Treat yourself like a job. We were talking the other day about how when looking for a position, looking for a full-time job is your full-time job. So do everything you can to implement processes that you can carry over to the company and elevate your success. But understand that even having your own logo or tracking your own socials or doing things like that, like announcers, when we are looking for announcers, we're looking for social engagement now. We're not looking for anybody who just sounds great on the radio. We want somebody who has a following, who can bring that to the table and will allow us to excel that on-air portion better using their digital platforms. So having a brand for yourself and really promoting yourself and what you do is a necessity in today's digital world.
Absolutely. Ian, anything you want to chime in here?
I guess it's not an exact answer to your question, Roshan, but I want to say that I got really lucky And a lot of our success, a lot of people in this business's success also is sometimes a stroke of luck. So when you look around and you see other people, you know, getting the gig that they want and you didn't get the gig that you wanted, and what am I doing wrong? And sometimes you might not be doing anything different than what they're doing. They just happen to be in the right place at the right time. And I think if I had not been at the right place at the right time, I would have maybe had some more regrets or thoughts about how I could have done things differently. But just because I ended up being in the right place at the right time and getting the right opportunities sort of presented to me, I feel like I'm pretty happy with the path that I took. I guess the one thing I would say would kind of mirror what Pooja said earlier, which is when I first started out, like when I first came out of school, first of all, I didn't go to radio school. So that was my first mistake. So you guys are all like one step ahead of where I was. Second of all, I was very much like, well, this is my job, so I'm just going to do my job and then I'm going to go home. And that's kind of all I did for the first couple of years. And yeah, guess what? I worked like 9 hours a week. You know, like I didn't get very far doing that. So eventually I started to do the stuff that we've been talking about today. And that's when it started to move. So that's why we tell you that. That's why I'm saying that, is because it works. That's what happens.
And listen to the station you're working at when you're not on air or whenever. You know, I've seen so many people come into the station and work in production or wherever, and they don't listen to the station, and that will burn you too. Mine is a little different, but mine is, you know, I'm much like you, Ian. I've been very happy and very lucky. But when I started, I was an op, then I was in production for a long time. And those are both, you know, more or less shift work where you just have a steady stream of work that's on a deadline, that's easy to follow. When I became a program director, it became obvious that my gap was more in organization and project management. So, you know, think ahead about what you want to be doing and think, okay, you know, there are other skills out there from other industries. I know a lot of radio people are disorganized. We're just that type of personality. So we like that fly by the seat of the pants mentality. And as you made the crack about PDs being lazy, you know, earlier, because there's so much going on and you're always, you know, that's exactly what it is. And it plays into that personality nicely. But I think focusing on some of those other important business-oriented skill sets can be very helpful long-term in your career, and developing those habits early will, you know, help you later. So you don't have a year or two like I had, where I was behind the 8 ball, it seemed, for quite some time, and then, you know, figured things out. I think that's a wrap. I just want to thank you all. If anyone has any last minute words of wisdom they want to put out there to the students watching, now is the time. And then we'll hand things back to Gina. So I'll let you guys have one final quick crack at what you'd like to tell the students.
Please put the correct radio station name in your cover letter. Like the one that you're applying to, put that one in the letter and on the resume. Just like check that over once or twice before you send it. I mean, like it's attention to detail.
Yeah, and when making resumes and cover letters and stuff in today's digital market, we're going to Google you anyway. So include a picture, include some content of cool stuff that you've done, make it look nice and presentable. Don't put it on a slant so I have to turn my head to read it. Like simple things that'll get you a leg up and make your resume and information stand out from the rest of the group.
My parting words would just be that I know that this is a lot of information, and you know, there's a lot coming at you. It's probably very intimidating as well to sort of take this on. Like the first time I walked into our radio station, I was like, oh my goodness, there's so many buttons. And I know it sounds silly, but the buttons intimidated me. So, you know, I want you to just sort of take away from all of this that we all started somewhere. We didn't know what we were doing. A lot of us were faking it till we made it, and that's fine too. And that, you know, we can all relate to being where you are. So don't hesitate to reach out to people. You have access to people like you have never had before. Again, you don't want to be annoying, as Ian put it, but you can reach out to people and ask for advice, and, you know, you have that access. So use it, and people want to help you because they remember what it was like. So just know that this is all possible. It's, you know, if this is your dream and this is what you really want, it will happen. You just, you know, you just have to be somebody who is put in the right position to make sure that those things happen. And all of this advice will put you in the right position.
And perseverance.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay. I don't think we're going to Gina now. I think we're going to go right to the TV news, sports, and operations panel. So I'm going to hand things over to that moderator, who is Carrie Ferguson, the anchor of Global Peterborough and Global Durham. And thank you all for joining us here today. My name is Paul Thomas, and I hope you guys have learned a lot. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Okay, we're all popping on. Thank you so much, Paul. Have we got everybody we need? Let's see the names. Yes, we do. Okay, everyone, I am Carrie Ferguson from Global. So I anchor the evening news for Global Peterborough and Global Durham. I'll be serving as your moderator today. I'll also be on the panel and answer some questions as well. So this is the final panel of the day. Can't believe it. Just tuned into that last one. I just learned a lot, you guys. How about you guys? It was really good. A lot of useful advice, but we are going to try and provide that for you as well today. So if you're interested in TV news, sports production, you're in the right place. That's what we're going to talk about today. So without further ado, let's meet the panel, beginning with Amy. Hi, Amy.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for sticking around. 4 o'clock. It's getting late in the day, but I'm so glad to be here to chat with everyone. My name is Amy Saracino, and I am the Broadcast Operations Manager for Global Toronto. So quick Coles notes on the job. I'm overseeing a team of just over 20 people, and we are producing newscasts from Saskatchewan all the way across the country to the Maritimes, depending on the day of the week and the time of the day. We're doing a Saskatoon news at 6, or we're doing a Halifax news at 6, or Montreal at 5:30. So there's lots happening across the country. And I have been there for 21 years, but we can get into the details of how that's possible a little bit later.
Awesome, Amy. Now I work with Amy's team every day. They are amazing. Okay, next, Lindsay. Hi, Lindsay.
Hello, happy 4 o'clock to everybody. I'm really excited to be here. I am the sports and music journalist for City News Toronto, as well as City News across Canada. I'm a contributor to Sportsnet, and I'm also the WNBA and basketball correspondent for BBC News in North America.
Which is absolutely amazing. So that's how Lindsay and I have bonded before over the Raptors, by the way, everyone. Okay, and finally, Shivangi is your student ambassador on our panel today. Hi, Shivangi, just tell us a bit about you and your program.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Shivangi Sharma, and I'm an international student in Conestoga College, and I am studying broadcasting, television, and independent production, and I am glad to be here.
We are so happy to have you here. Okay, and another thing I want to add in too. So we're going to kind of run down what our days are like, kind of the roles that we're in, an overview of what we do, and then we're going to go to a Q&A period. So for the students out there, if you have questions, use the Q&A box. Don't be shy. We don't bite. We want to share everything we know with you. So if there's anything that you think of along the way as we're talking, type in those questions and we will keep track of them. We'll try and answer them, and we'll also leave a good 10-15 minutes at the end of this panel just to answer questions. Okay, so let's begin now with sharing a little bit about what we all do. Let's kind of paint a picture of a day in the life of. Amy, let's start with you.
Sure. So, generally speaking, I'm coordinating with our directors, our camera operators, our audio team, to make sure that all of the broadcasts that we're doing every day are making it to air. So that starts with staffing it. So I do all of the scheduling to make sure that we've got the right people and the right seats to take everything to air. I'm also coordinating with engineering if there's a technical problem and now, the mic isn't working on a certain person. So I'm there to try to help out. How can we fix that issue? If it's an unsolvable issue, I can also coordinate with our master control team. And, this is literally just happened minutes before this panel. We thought we weren't going to be able to get a Kingston broadcast on the air because they've had a failure. So I was madly hoping that would be solved before the panel started. So I'm coordinating with them saying, okay, we can't do Kingston at 6. We want to run this program instead. How do we get that to air? And, who needs to know that information? So a lot of my role currently is sort of dealing with all the different teams to come together to get a broadcast on the air. So some days it's smooth sailing, and everybody's in. There's no sick calls, there's no technical trouble, and we get things going. And then other days like today, there's sometimes a panic, before showtime. I also can be the contact and point person for any specials. So if we're doing, the royal wedding or the Queen's Jubilee, I tend to be the person that starts that conversation about, okay, who do we need? How many people do we need in the control room to do that job? What control room, because we have a few at Global Toronto, what control room is best suited for this thing? Do we need a big control room if we're doing the federal election where we've got to fit 15 people in there and everybody needs a desk and a computer? Or is it something smaller where it's a handful of people? So where are we going to do it? Who's going to be in the seat? Making sure master controllers are aware we're doing it. They're going to know what source to take to get us on the air. And then, coordinating the editorial side with the tech side. So here's the producer. This is the thing that I want to do. I want the show to start with a unicorn riding in on a rainbow. Okay, how do I get the unicorn on the rainbow on TV? And that's, when I have to go back to my team and say, this is what they want. Can we do it? Oh, we can. We've got a unicorn. Let's make that happen. Or sometimes we can't, and we have to go back and say, we might have to scale back. Can we just use a pony instead? So it's sometimes some diplomatic conversations that have to happen about, we can do this, but maybe this would be a better option.
Okay, and I'm told, Amy, you were directing before this, right? I'm told you were one of the best in the business. That's what your team said to me.
That is that's very generous. Yeah, I did direct for many years, and honestly was the highlight. That I loved it. I love being in that control room environment, and we can maybe talk about a little bit about that later when we're talking about our paths. But it's very exciting, and I do miss it a little bit. But yeah, thanks for saying that.
Yeah,
it's very generous.
Okay, so let's go to Lindsay now. And Lindsay, you have the fun job, I think, out of all of us. Yeah.
I think I do. After hearing everything Amy does, I'm like, okay, my job is definitely not that hard. And I feel bad that I'm here talking about this. Also, Amy directed me for a bit. And if you ever saw anything good on the station, it was because of her. She is a saint. I also worked with Carrie. We'll talk about that in a moment. But there is no typical day for me because I have these kind of combined jobs of music and sports. It changes every day. So the basics are, I am our only sports reporter for all of City News. So I have to talk to the different markets to see what they would like me to file, if they want something separately, what's the big story of the day, and then also focus on my main job at City News Toronto. For example, today I was on a presser with Bobby Webster about the Raptors trade deadline, and I'm listening to clips of that, asking questions. I have to write something for digital, and then I also earlier in the day file stuff for radio about some of the other stories happening, whether it be with the Leafs or a WNBA player that's joined the Raptors 905 roster. So throughout the day, I'm filing for radio and picking the content that we're going to air for sports across the country on City News, doing multiple interviews, adding in the music element of that. Like today I interviewed Slash and then Kevin Hearn of Bare Naked Ladies. Not to name drop, it just was a weird day where this happened. And then throwing in the Raptors presser and all of the sports news with the Olympics. So it is really fun. It is a lot of stuff that's happening and I have to constantly juggle. And then the best part is I do get to go to the game. So like last night I was at the Leafs game, but I was reporting. So I'm pretty much working from 8 a.m. to sometimes midnight or 1 a.m. But I love my job. And that's what I do is I get to share stories that hopefully I tell a little bit differently about sports and music happening every day.
See, told you it's the fun job. That's awesome, Lindsay. Okay, I'll tell you a bit about my day. So I come in, I hit the ground running. So I take an assignment call from home in the morning at 9, just to kind of get an idea of how the day is going to play out. I come into the station for 1 now because we have a morning crew that comes in. So they try and clear out with COVID before we come in. So we keep our numbers to a minimum here. I am responsible for, writing, producing 2 updates. I do an afternoon update, an evening update. What else? I do a radio newscast, which is 90 seconds. Who would have ever thought I'd do radio? Didn't know I would, but I do it now. So that's got news, sports, and weather in that. I record those. Then I anchor for Global Durham. So I touch base with the producer, go through the newscast, hop up on the desk, get that done. Then I record those updates that I wrote. And then when I get off the desk, I go back, look at radio. If there's breaking news, I jump back on. Then I start going through our 6 o'clock for Global Peterborough, hop on, do that. After that, so it's an hour of live from 6 to 7. After that, then so I'm working with Amy's team for all of this, by the way. And then I record the late newscast. So I basically read all day long. A lot of news. But it's fun. You know what? I wouldn't change it for the world. I love the busy pace. I do kind of lose my voice by Fridays sometimes, but again, I wouldn't change it for the world. Okay, so let's talk about the paths that we all took to get to where we are, because I always find it so fascinating with people in the business, schooling, where you went to school and how you got that start. Lindsay, let's start with you on that one.
All right, so fun fact, I am actually extremely shy and I never wanted to be on TV. And I'm on TV. So you actually will hear that quite a bit in this industry, but I started out writing for a newspaper in Regina, Saskatchewan, where I'm from. It was for free. It was for people under 20 that wanted to be a journalist. And I wrote about anything I could. And then I went to journalism school and I was terrified. I was so scared to do any of this. So I ended up moving to Calgary to go to their broadcast program there, where I wouldn't know anybody and I'd have to be out of my shell. When I was there, I also became a board op for a talk show radio station in Regina. So I drive back on the weekends from Calgary to Regina and learn the ropes on that. And I fell in love with the radio and having to tell this story just through somebody's voice. And I did that for several years. And then when school was done, I got an internship at CTV Yorkton. And through that, I then got a digital role at CTV Regina, which then led to a reporting job at CTV Regina, which then led to them having a morning show opening. And because I was a local kid, they're like, let's give her a chance. How bad could it be? Wasn't terrible, but I survived it. And I ended up being like sports, entertainment, traffic. There's no traffic in Regina. I can say that I'm from there. It was quite the challenge. Digital. And after that, I got an opportunity to work at CTV News Channel after working at CTV for a while. And I was only there for a month before I got a wonderful opportunity to work at a station that was called Channel 12 that eventually became Global Durham, where I worked with Carrie, who every day would vet my script and help with me. And I would shoot my own story, write my own story, edit my own story, write the newscast, anchor the newscast. And then on top of that, I was still freelancing as a sports and music journalist for various publications in North America. And then Global Durham moved to Toronto, where I got to work with Amy, who then directed me and was so kind. And that for me was one of the most challenging parts of this all, because there's a lot of international news, which I did not have to report on for my entire career. So bless her, she was helping me get through a lot of these stories I never heard of, or places that I clearly didn't know how to pronounce properly. And through that, then I got an offer from TSN, from some of my freelance stuff they saw. And then from TSN, City News contacted me because I actually didn't want to be on TV anymore. And when I was at City, I was producing, loving the people I was working with. And then they offered me, hey, we haven't reported on music in a while. City, if no one knows, they were like the original Much Music. It was their station back in the day. They wanted to bring it back. And then I was really lucky. They saw that I had a sports background and then created the position of a sports and music journalist for me, which is one of a kind, and I love it. But during all of this, I have also freelanced on the side for BBC, ESPN, Rolling Stone magazine, Billboard, because I love to work, which is not a good habit to have too much. But that was my journey, Cole's Notes, a lot of stops along the way, and you meet a lot of wonderful people.
Definitely. The hard work pays off. And I mean, it's amazing to hear. And that's why I like sharing these stories, because you have to go after what you want, right? And you have to be willing to try everything to find what you want too. That's amazing, Lindsay. I love it. And I miss working with you, by the way.
Me too.
Okay, Avi, how about your path?
Sure. And I miss working with you too. So my path was not as crisscross in the country as Lindsay's was. I am originally from Niagara, and so I came to Toronto to go to school. I did a joint program with York University where I did a double major, and then Seneca where I did broadcasting, the radio and TV program. So it was 5 years at York and 3 years at Seneca, sort of York for one, together for three, and then finished at York for the last. And through my Seneca program, I got an internship at Global, and it was to work on a talk show that they used to have called Binin. It was sort of like an entertainment-y talk show. And the internship, I think, it wasn't for very long. It was like maybe 6 weeks or 2 months. And I would go in every day, schlepping on the bus, because Global is not near anything. And I did my internship. I was doing research. I was, setting up interviews. When the guests would arrive at the station, I would get their coffee and walk them to the green room and sort of, make sure that everybody was prepared. And I really loved it. I just loved being in there. And I guess, at some point somebody recognized that I was doing a good job and I was super eager, and a part-time position became available for an editorial assistant, and they offered it to me, which was amazing. So I basically went from intern in the spring, and then I got hired as a part-time role in the fall. So for my last year of school, I was working there as well. And an EA is, you're getting the scripts, you're rolling the prompter, you're making sure the coffee machine is filled. You're answering the phone if it needed to be answered, and sort of all of the things that are happening that make the station kind of tick. From there, I was offered a job to do some graphic playout for the live shows. So in my mind, when I went to school, I thought I really wanted to be a reporter. That was kind of what I wanted to do. And then when I got hired, they, you would, as an EA, you could go out with the camera person and get clips. So they say, oh, the reporter's doing the story, but they say, okay, Amy, I'm doing the story on this. I need you to ask these 3 questions to this person. And I would go, and I just hated it. I thought I was so nervous. I got like totally uncomfortable. And I thought, oh my gosh, like, this is what I thought I wanted to do, and now I'm doing it, and I don't like it at all. But what I loved was being in the control room. It was dark. It's very exciting. It's live. I love the vibe of everybody working together for that period of time to get that show on the air. And so I really had to decide, like, what am I going to do now? And so I got offered to do this graphics playout job, and I accepted that, and I did that part-time. And then that just got me in the control room even deeper. And then I got kind of lucky because I skipped over the job, which would have been next, which was Chiron operator back in the day, where you're typing out everybody's name keys and putting them to air. And I got to move ahead to a production assistant. So you're working with the director. Some stations call it an AD, assistant director. We called it a PA, production assistant. And in that role, you're sitting right next to the director. You're counting out all of the times of the show. You've got to get really good at your, counting backwards and clock math instead of regular math. And it's a very stressful job. But I loved it. And, it just kind of from there evolved. The director position became available. And so I got to move into the director's role. And I did that for a period of time. And then the supervising director position became available. So then I became the person overseeing all of the directors. And then from there, the operations manager job came up. So not just the directors now, but overseeing all of the control room staff. So for me, the path was, I was at Global the whole time. I did do some freelancing. I freelanced at Sportsnet. I freelanced for CTV a little bit. I liked that, kind of getting to see the other stations and how they worked. But I'm not such a risk taker. And the nervousness about going completely freelance, I wasn't comfortable with that. I liked that I had a job, even though the hours are crazy and you'd be working like weekends and early mornings and late at night. And, sometimes you're doing all of those shifts in 1 week. It was very hard in the beginning to have a schedule. You didn't know what that schedule was. And because I was eager, I would just accept whatever shift was. Like, you want to work overtime? You want to do 7 days a week? Yes, I'll do it. I'll take it. So it was, I loved that. But the interesting thing for me was just that I went into it with one thing in mind. And then when I got the opportunity to do that one thing, I realized that I did not want to do that one thing. But I was still lucky that I found my home in the control room. And, those were my people. I just loved that energy. And it can be very tense and very stressful depending on what kind of situation it is. And sometimes there's yelling, and sometimes, there's some fist banging on the desk. But the great thing about Global is that no matter what's happening for that hour, say you're on the hour, you're on the air for an hour and it's very intense and the producer's screaming, like, go to this, and you're screaming, I can't go to that, it's not ready. And then you finish the show and it's fine, because we all know that was in that moment, to get that thing on the air. Everybody's tense and we wanted to do it. And then we just put that to the side, you know, and we could really be friends. You know, Global, it was really a big family there. People would hang out outside of work and people were very friendly and everybody wanted each other to succeed. But we all understood that sometimes, you know, things had to get done. And I'm a pretty positive person and an encouraging person, I like to think. And so they've nicknamed me when I had to get tough or whatever. They said, oh, Business Amy's here today, because I get like a different tone in my voice, you know. If I really need something done right away, the Business Amy appears and she kind of takes over for a little while. But it was a fun journey. And for me, it was great being at the same place the whole time, because there's comfort in people knowing you, knowing how hard I worked, giving me those opportunities, and allowing me to grow there where I felt at home. So, you know, unlike Lindsay, where she was going to several different places and finding her home in each of those places, I found my home here, and I've, you know, I've just lived there all this time.
That's awesome, Amy. And now you're working from home, which I have to point out, you've got young kids. I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, 4 and 6, and it's been a time.
It's impressive that you pull it off. And talking about the control room too, that chaos that happens, it's amazing, because I'm on the other end, I'm out on the desk. And it is amazing when you work with such professionals like Amy and her team. I don't know that stuff is going on behind the scenes. I don't want to know what's going on behind the scenes. But after the cast, we're friends. We talk about it, you know, what happened, what went wrong. And it is just such a sign of a true professional to not let the person out on the desk or whatever, the people out doing the live, they don't need to know about the chaos. And you guys just somehow always pull it together. It's pretty amazing.
That's nice to hear. And I honestly just like, if there are people who are looking at a career like a control room or a director role, it's one of, you know, my top priorities in trying to tell people is put yourself in that anchor's shoes. You know, nobody knows who I am. They see a picture of me, they don't know what I'm doing. They don't know that maybe I made the mistake and now the poor anchor is out there trying to like scramble. It's their face, right? And so it's really important that you put yourself in their shoes, and not freak them out. Like if there's mad chaos, I just have these moments of like, people are like, Carrie, we're going to go to camera 2 and that's it. You know, like to just really.
And that's exactly how it sounds.
them.
I'm not even kidding. That's what we, it's that calm voice. It's okay. Coming to camera 2 next. Okay.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
So important.
Oh, yeah, it is. Okay, I'll give you a quick rundown because, oh my gosh, we're eating up time here. Okay, so I went to school. Actually, I was going through school to be an English high school teacher. That's what I thought I wanted to do. I went up to North Bay. I know. Can you believe it, Lindsay? I can't imagine it now. Anyway, so I went up to school in North Bay to Nipissing University. It was a new concurrent education program. Whatever, started down that path, took a teaching assistant job, realized, no, that's not for me. My moment kind of happened. I was coming off the bus one day to go into campus, and up there, Nipissing and Canadore College share a campus. So there was a camera with a student reporter standing in front of it, and it was that aha moment for me. You know how people talk about that cheesy aha moment? I swear that is my aha moment in life, because I'm like, that's what I want to do. It was remarkable, actually. So anyway, so I finished off my English degree, went to Canadore for that program. It doesn't exist anymore, which is a shame because it was a great program. We set up internships. I actually got a job before I got to my internship though. And what happened, it was a job board at school, which, yeah, check those guys because you'll never know what's going to pop up there. It was a job in Dauphin, Manitoba. Lindsay will know where that is. It's in the middle of nowhere. Actually, the station doesn't exist anymore. It shut down when I was there. But it was amazing because I learned how to do everything. It was a videographer. So we'd go in at 9 o'clock in the morning. It was a videographer job. You'd shoot for the day. We'd take turns doing the noon show, which we would read agriculture numbers. It was like cow calf pairs trading at. I'm like, what have I done with my life? Anyway, and then we'd finish our story for the day, and we'd then hop on the desk and read a 6 o'clock newscast. So it was a good like 10-hour day. I made absolutely no money. It was horrific. But I learned so much. So I'd do it all over again. Anyway, that station closed down. I went to Brandon, Manitoba. Again, Lindsay, you'll know that station. It is shut down too. I was a producer there, so I got to experience the control room, and that was back before computers and everything timed everything out. It was literally a pencil and paper back timing the show. And I am terrible at math, as most of us are because we're in this industry. Back timing a show, wholly stressful. Anyways, also backup anchor, ended up on the anchor desk. Where did I go next? Job came up in Timmins, Ontario. I wanted to get back to Ontario. I'm from Ontario. So took that job. That was really hard too. Big cameras. I was out in the field. I took a backup anchor job, knew I wanted to anchor. So I got a call from CTV Saskatoon. Out of the blue, I had sent a demo forever ago. And so that's another piece of advice. Just keep sending your stuff out there, because the jobs, when they come up, usually people have already talked about applicants that have already come in, demos they've already seen. So get your stuff out there. So went to Saskatoon, CTV Saskatoon. I was reporting, anchoring. The job came open at CTV at Global Saskatoon for the 6 o'clock anchor. They actually asked me if I was interested. Went there. 6 years I was there. This job came open back home. I'm back here. That's my story. So again, like Lindsay, a lot of crisscrossing, but you know what I learned? I learned a lot about myself. I learned how to do everything, right? Which I think it's amazing, because I have so much respect, Amy, for what goes on in a control room, because I've been back there when the crap hits the fan, and it's wild. Anyway, so I knew for me, I was opposite. I'm like, whoa, I can't handle this. I'm going out to the studio where it's quiet. Anyway, okay, so let's move on, because oh gosh, we've only got about 10 minutes left. Let's give some tips. Let's give some practical advice to the students out there about landing that first job, maybe some tips for interviews when you land that first interview. Amy, let's start with you.
Sure. I think, it's important to be on time. It's important to, take it seriously. And I know maybe that sounds kind of silly, but I think sometimes we're kind of in a casual world now, and I think that can carry over into work a little bit. And I think for me personally, I still really appreciate when somebody comes, ready to have an interview. They've watched Global, they know what shows we do. Maybe they've done a little Googling and they go, oh, I see you guys have robotic cameras. Just a little tidbit that shows me that you've invested a little bit into this interview. You didn't just send a resume out and you didn't have any thought. When you got the interview, you came prepared. I also really like it when you have questions in the interview. I always finish with, do you have any questions? And I appreciate when there are some, because it's a nice, it's that opportunity really for you to find out a little bit more about the job, about the station, what's the culture like. It's really important, I think, to ask those questions. And I think, you have to know when you're coming in, if it's in sort of a more entry level role, that there might be things that you think are a little bit beneath what you would expect to be doing. And that's okay, because we're all just trying to do a show, and so even now in my role now, when I go into the station, if they're like, oh my gosh, we don't have somebody to roll the prompter, like, I'll go roll the prompter, no problem. If the anchor is on the desk and I need hairspray, I'll go grab you hairspray. There's no problem. I don't look down on any task that's being asked of me. And I think that maybe I've overstepped, Carrie. That's not really an interview thing, but that's just like when if you've gotten the job now and you're there, people aren't asking you to do something to make you, to belittle you, to make you feel like that's all you can do. We're asking you because it's a fast-paced environment, and if that anchor needs some hairspray or a lint roller, they need it right now. Like, whoever's closest to the makeup room, please go and get that thing. So I think I think it's really important just to be agreeable to what's being asked of you in the moment, and I certainly wouldn't say no to whatever that is. And it's really appreciated, and honestly, it's really noticed when people do agree to those things, or when somebody gives an eye roll and is like, you really want me to go and do that thing? You know, it's, people notice those things, and you might think that they don't, but they really do. They really do. So that's, you know, my big piece of advice for people starting out is the hours are going to be weird, and you might be asked to do stuff that, you know, you've done 5 years of university and you're like, am I really going to make somebody their coffee? But you are. It's fine. You know, it really is fine.
I just want to
Totally agree.
Gary,
Yeah,
'cause I
Lindsay,
don't
go ahead.
so much have interview tips, because to be honest, I'm not the best at it, because it has changed so much since I last had an interview. But I do have a lot of people ask me like, hey, are there any jobs opening, or what advice do you have? But the number one thing, and I know this sounds crazy, is to be kind to each other. This is such a small industry. I had no idea Amy or Carrie were going to be on this panel before I accepted it. And it turns out that they were, and they both were so nice to me. I know that I haven't been nice every single day of my life, but I know that these two women were very gracious with their time. They helped me gain confidence. They also helped me advance my career. And almost everybody who I've met throughout this industry, whether it even be people I went to school with, I've somehow come in contact again, even if they were from the middle of Saskatchewan or Dauphin, Manitoba, whatever it may be, you somehow will come into connection with them again. And really, just in life, I think that all should be our motto of just be kind. There's really no reason to be mean unless, hey, sometimes people are mean to you, and sometimes you have to be stern, but there's a difference between it. So please, be nice to everybody, because you will most likely encounter them again in this industry. But you really also, I think, don't be in this if you want to be famous. And I know people are hearing that, they're not going to like it. And I know it's a different industry than when I started, but the amount of people sending me like TikTok videos or this, or, oh, hey, I saw you interviewed this famous person and I just want to be on TV. Like Amy mentioned, and Carrie, the hours can be really long, and you're most likely not going to start off with the dream job you want. And you honestly may not get it, it may shift, but you're going to start somewhere, and you have to find the passion in that job. Pushing buttons at a radio station, I had joy helping somebody else create their content. Eventually you'll get to maybe a job that you will love, and it may not be the one you want, but we all start somewhere. So don't come in with a huge ego. Like Amy said, thinking something's below you. You have to start somewhere, and that will eventually get you those opportunities. A lot of the biggest part is just getting your foot in the door, being nice, being grateful, finding that passion, and having a work ethic. You're going to need it. And if you're in this just to be famous, that most likely is not going to translate to you being long-term in this industry. I know that's harsh, but I'm just trying to be helpful, because nobody told me that.
Absolutely. Totally agree with that. We've talked about this too, burning bridges. I can't even tell you how many times I have seen people burn bridges. You know, don't be a jerk. It's gonna bite you in the end. The whole karma thing, it is so true. I actually had I won't name any names. It was a sports guy. I worked with him, not easy to work with. He doesn't work in the business anymore, but I had started a new job. He had applied there. They just asked, hey, you know this guy? I'm like, yeah, he's kind of a jerk, but he was. So just be careful, because it will bite you in the butt. I promise you. Okay. So, Shivangi, we only have 4 minutes left for questions. Do you have some ready to go?
Yes, I do have.
Okay.
We all talk about that networking is the key for a successful career. But as a student, so let's just take an example, a situation that I found one of you on LinkedIn, and I follow you and I give you a request. So what are the chances that there will be a positive reward from your side, and what is the best way, proper way to approach anyone, either for a job or internship or for anything? Like, how do we make connections? Because we all talk about making connections and keeping them alive, but the first thing is for the students, like, how do we start?
Yeah, good one. I'm going to start with that one too. I'm the LinkedIn person. My profile isn't too built up on there. So students do that too. Build up your profiles, okay? But I think it's so important. Your role right now, the student ambassador, that's huge. We see you. I know your name now. That's the same thing. When I was in school, I got onto, it was an advisory board. And so, I picked brains around that table. Then my first boss was from that, my second boss, third boss was from the advisory board. So get out there, volunteer, get into those kind of roles. Amy, how about with you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think, most of the teachers in the programs either worked at these stations or know people who work at stations. And so I would suggest that you sort of start with them. We do internships too. And so I think it's important to find out, I don't know how every school does it, but is there an internship program? How can I apply for that? And then talk to your teachers. We've had teachers call and say, we have this really great student, and if you need somebody starting out, I would love to do it. And we have done the reverse and reached out and said, we have this job we're trying to fill, and do you have anybody really great? So I think take school seriously and your relationship with your teachers and the staff there, because they really can be the ones to open that first door for you.
I'll add on to that because I'm not great at social media. I find it overwhelming. So there's so many requests in this just for anybody. And I honestly, kudos to everybody here that has a great social media game. But when somebody does reach out to me saying like, hey, is there an internship or can I shadow you for a day? I will look at their social media. And I'm telling you right now, if there's somebody doing bong rips or there's half nudes or just crazy things that, and I know in a sense, I'm very old school in terms of representation in what I wear or what I post online, but I do not want somebody that may not represent the company or even be associated with me in not a positive light. So you really need to watch what you're putting on social media. And I know the world has changed. Some places they're not as caring as much about that, but for me, I do. I will immediately go look to see if you have any, maybe things that could be taken as hateful posted online or anything like that. So please watch what you're putting online. And I know you've probably been told that so many times by your teachers, and just a rule in general is just watch that. But most likely, like a lot of people, if you reach out every once in a while, like sometimes we all get bombarded with emails. I get close to 1,000 a day. I look, and if they're like, hey, can I have an internship? Well, like I can't offer it, but I can maybe let you shadow a day, or I can let you hop on an interview on Zoom with me so you can see what the process is. So just don't take it personally if somebody doesn't respond. That's also a thing. Or if your demo doesn't get watched. It is a tough industry. We're all in it together, but watch your social media and put out on LinkedIn, then maybe try to find their email just saying, hey, if you have a moment, I'd like to connect with you. The worst they can do is not respond or just say no.
Yeah, for sure. Good advice there, for sure, Lindsay. What else did I want to say about that? Internships. Try and think long and hard about where to apply for an internship. If they're still happening, I'm not sure what's going on right now, but I can tell you half of our staff here started as interns, at least half, and have worked their way up. So that's a huge one. And if you land that internship, work your butt off, impress people, be confident, don't be cocky. That's my advice there. Okay. Oh my goodness. I think we're out of time. Can we fit in one more question, Gina, or are we done?
You're welcome to fit in another question if you'd like.
Okay, let's have another one, Shimaji. It's going too fast.
So there are so many questions in the question and answers chat box too.
Yeah.
So I saw this one, that how do you guys balance work life with their own life? Any tips on balancing that?
I love that question. You know what, Amy, let's start with you because I know what you're going through at home right now.
Yeah. I mean, prior to the pandemic, it was a bit easier to balance work and home because I was at work and I was at home. And now everything is here around my dining room table, and it's become a bit more complicated. But I think it is hard. I don't want to sugarcoat it because it can be very hard to find the balance, especially when you're starting out. And I know in the very beginning, you're getting asked to do a bunch of different shifts, and you might be in a relationship with a person who's working like a nice 9 to 5. And now that person's on 9 to 5 and you're doing 4 to midnight and they're off on weekends and you're working weekends, and it can be challenging. And so all I can say is that you sort of have to kind of mentally prepare for that, and know that it hopefully is for a period of time, that there's going to be something happening on the other side where life will balance out a little bit. I do think it's important, and it is hard in news because news can break at any moment. And so I could just be at home on a Saturday having dinner, and suddenly there's some crisis that we've got to staff up and get people to the station. And in those moments you have to say, I have to step aside from this right now and deal with the work thing. And then there are other times when maybe it's not as big a crisis. You can potentially delegate some of that work to somebody else, because you're prioritizing your family in that moment. It is important to make those determinations on when I really need to focus on my work, even though it's when I'm supposed to be at home, and when I can, maybe ask somebody else. It's great. I have a really good right hand guy at work with me. We work like a pair, and so if I'm super swamped with something, he can pick up the other part. If he's super swamped, he will pass it over to me. So it's nice to have somebody that you can work like that with as well. But maybe that's not a great answer, to not sugarcoat it, but it can be, it really can be hard to find that balance, and I think if you're getting into news, you have to be aware of that. There are going to be times when your vacation is going to get interrupted because something's happened at work that you have to kind of sort out. A colleague of mine, they had to postpone their Disneyland vacation because there was an election that got called and she had to be the person to do it. So there are times when you have to make those decisions, and that's a really personal thing on what is it that's going to be to take away from my family or my relationship, and what can I maybe not deal with that right now at 9 o'clock at night and deal with that tomorrow morning.
Yeah, absolutely. It's tough. Okay, Lindsay, how about you?
I won't sugarcoat it either. See, I don't have children, and I have, just mostly because of the pandemic, I have absolutely almost no work to home balance because I am home all the time. But the problem is I annoyingly love my job too much that when somebody asks, like, can you interview this artist, or if there's a game, do you want to cover, like, I'm always going to say yes. And it's learning to say no, which is something I have to and everybody has to do. So I will say, learn from my mistakes. You have to eventually set boundaries. And so, like, I can't sugarcoat it. I'm going to probably be working till 11 o'clock tonight, and I love it. But so many people I know around me are burnt out because they're not setting those boundaries. So I'm just saying, if you can learn from me and someone else, try to take an hour away from pretty much everything that is coming down in the world on us. And it's just it's really hard in this industry, like Amy and everyone's saying, is because there's so much news happening and it constantly is changing. And you also, like, if there's a story, you want to go chase it, you have to realize, like, is it worth your family life? Are you trying to advance your career? And really watch those priorities. And to be honest, I've always put my career forward. And I have a partner, like I have a husband though that understands it. So it's teach their own. It is really hard. I know a lot of people that speak to counselors, because you also will sometimes, depending on what part of the job you're in, you'll see some crazy things and report about stuff. So please also watch out for your mental health. And I know we're running out of time. I didn't see the Q&A questions. So my email's on my Twitter account and I want to answer them because there's a lot of good ones about being a woman in sports and music and all that. So please, I'll be online for the next couple hours. Send me a note. I'm sorry I missed them.
Good advice there. Yeah, you know what? Reach out to us by email. You can find Amy and I too on website, go to global.ca. You can find our emails on there. We'd love to hear from you. We really would. Okay, we're out of time. I can't believe how fast that went. Okay, so thank you. Thank you. Oh, doesn't it? Doesn't it? It's been amazing to share our experiences, and we really appreciate it. OAB has been, it's awesome that we do this event.
Thank you so much, Carrie, Amy, Lindsay. Thank you for saying yes to this one as well. Add it to the list, and Shivangi as well. Thank you for participating in this. On behalf of the OAB, I really want to thank all of our panelists, especially our students, for being here and showing your interest in this career, and looking forward to, all the opportunities that are available for you very soon, and how you'll take this advice. Thank you to Evanov Communications for being our title sponsor, also our panel sponsors, Fanshawe College, Loyalist College, and also MZ Media. We're going to replay Getting the Gig video by Troy McCallum at the end of this, if you were not able to enjoy that at the beginning. So hang on for that. I also wanted to say that there will be a Zoom follow-up invite for your feedback, so that we can make sure that we continue to deliver the content and the information that you want for this. And the future definitely looks bright with all of you entering into this career, and by all of your engaging questions that you are asking. We can all tell that you're excited and really looking forward to seeing where this goes. We all love following your paths. So thank you again to the committee members and everyone who is here, and all the best in your job search. And you've made lots of new contacts and friends here today. And we do have the OAB job board that we also want you to visit. We'll throw that link into the chat one more time before you sign off. Thanks again, everyone. And thanks to the OAB.
Good luck, everyone.
Welcome, broadcasting students in OAB. First of all, thank you so much for asking me to bestow upon you everything that's in here. God help you. Bear with me. Don't have a lot of time. Got to be a lot of fast edits here. I got too much stuff. Okay. You got to get their attention. Just send us your best stuff. And then you got 15 seconds, at least in my books you do, 15 seconds to wow me, to make me think, oh yeah, okay, this person's got some qualities there I think I might be able to work with. So there you go. Step one on getting the gig. Can you do production? Can you write? Can you produce? Can you edit video? Can you shoot video? Social media. Yes, being on air is important, but in today's industry, in case you haven't noticed, things are shrinking. So ultimately, you want to be the person where if they need to let somebody go, they go, we can't let them go. They do too much. They're too valuable. So be that person in order to get the gig. Attitude is everything, okay? If somebody calls you up, a program director calls you up, say, hey, I heard your demo. I think it's pretty good. Are you interested in chatting? You're like, wow, holy cow, I can't believe this is so out of the blue. Tell me a little bit more about it. And if it's okay, can I call you back at a good time and go over some questions that I may have? Get yourself some passion, because that will help you. What? You need your foot in the door, because when you get your foot in the door, it gives you that opportunity to go, hey, I can do this. Hey, I'd like to try this. Volunteer for everything. Even if you don't know it, learn it. I was offered the job of program director. I'd never been a program director before. I'm 7+ years into it. Things are pretty good. I didn't really know everything about it, but I said yes, and I learned along the way. And you know what I got? I got the gig. You got to be willing to relocate. You got to be willing to move. You got to go where the money is, and set yourself some goals when you're there. All right? I'm in small market, Alberta. I give myself 2 years to learn as much as I possibly can so I can move on and get the next best gig in a bigger market with more money. And then set yourself another goal of 2 years or maybe 3 years. Life gets in the way. But either way, know where you ultimately want to go and work towards getting there. Make those phone calls. Make those connections. Do all that networking. It's very important. Send out your demos to PDs of markets that you want to go to and ask for their critiques. If they don't get back to you right away, chances are a lot won't, but just keep trying. Do not lose sight of where you want to be so you can ultimately what? Passion is going to be what fuels your career onward and upward. So thank you for the opportunity to chat with you, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Good luck. Get a gig.